we're supposed to be looking at. And,
Good evening and welcome to the special board meeting of the Fairport Central School District, March 24th, 6:30. This is an opportunity for the superintendent and the various administrators who are here, which we are pretty full staff here, to share with us what they have been working on with the reentry plans that they've been developing. For those in the room, there are exits in case the alarm should go off. And those of you watching at home, I think it's important also, as my fire department friends will tell me, it's important to also have a fire evacuation plan at home. So when you have a chance to do that, please do so. My public service announcement for the night.
You're so much better than I am. I never remember.
With that, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Brett, and he's going to start the presentation.
Thank you very much, Tim. I really appreciate the opportunity visiting with the Board of Education. I know that we have a group of administrators who have been facilitating and intricately involved in our return to full-time instruction planning. Today, we hope to share current state that we are in, and it's an ever-changing state, as the information that we knew yesterday is different today. We have common themes that we've learned through our advisory committee that our facilitators and principals will be able to delve into with the Board of Education. This will be a session where the board will be able to fluidly interact and ask questions and develop their own understanding. And then we're hopefully going to be able to confirm our next steps as we move through this process and the scenarios that are unique to each of the three different grade bands that are giving advisory to our district. It's important to recognize the CDC shifted distancing guidelines from 6 feet to 3 feet. That has incredible implications and opportunities for us to resume full-time school to in-person learning. Recently, Public Health Commissioner Dr. Mendoza and the County Executive Adam Bello supported distancing changes. They even sent letters to the Department of Health and to the governor. It's worth reading. Again, this was Friday. These letters came out when the CDC altered their plans and distancing requirements. Based upon scientific inquiry, it has been proven or shown that it is safely to use 3 feet in classrooms, as long as other COVID-19 mitigation measures, including masking, are in place. It is also important to recognize that barriers are not acknowledged as a way to mitigate or to provide effective mitigation for students to safely sit at the 3-foot distance. The new guidance recommends this distancing modification be in place for all elementary, middle, and high schools where community transmission rates are low, moderate, or substantial. It further says elementary schools where community transmission is high, they are able to come to school under the 3-foot guidance with this concept of cohorting and podding. In the middle school, if we're in a transmission rate in our community that is high, greater than 100 per 100,000 over a 7-day rolling average, the recommendation remains at 6 feet of physical distance. However, if you're able to cohort or pod or contact trace, and I am going to make a proposal that we can contact trace, that we can immediately know where our students are every single period of the day if there is a breakout or an infection of COVID-19 in our schools. We can easily trace that. So they came out and said this on Friday, hoping that the New York State Department of Health will provide support to schools. But the New York State has remained silent. They have not responded to any of our advocacy efforts or to our county executive and our local health commissioners' advocacy pleas. This afternoon, we learned that Dr. Mendoza and Adam Bello further distanced himself and said if the state is not going to be able to approve, that their support may not be there as well. So I think that's important to recognize. It's a changing tenor from where we were a day ago. So, here we have one statement saying, hey, let's get these children back into school. It's a safe bet to do so. And now they're coming back saying, well, we need to hear from New York State Department of Health, right? So it's creating a little reverberation throughout the community, and we're waiting to see how that pans out. Again, here is our elementary schools based upon the CDC guidance. If we're in a low transmission or moderate transmission, physical distancing at least 3 feet between students in classrooms works. We feel, as you'll hear in a little bit, that we could do this effectively. We could be less than 6 feet and greater than 3 feet in most instances. And we're also aware that we may need to shift some classrooms if we need to make adjustments. In elementary schools, again, if there's substantial transmission or high transmission, physical distancing can remain at 3 feet of distance between students in classrooms. They are recommending cohorting when possible. Again, there's levels of ambiguity about what that means, when possible. We feel confident in grades K through 6, we could do this effectively with the distancing and keeping groups of students together. For our middle and high school students, when there's low and moderate transmission rates, physical distancing at least 3 feet between students in the classrooms. This is taken right from the CDC guidance. Again, we anticipate that we could be greater than 3 feet, less than 6 feet moving forward. Our secondary administrators are well aware and are making arrangements, and if there are places where it's going to be tight, looking at alternative arrangements, classrooms that are larger or alternative spaces that are larger to accommodate this. If we are in the orange or red transmission rates, middle and high school students, physical distancing, at least 3 feet of distance between students in classrooms, and cohorting recommended when possible. Okay. If we are in the red transmission, schools that cannot use cohorting, at least 6 feet of distancing between students and classroom is required. Again, I offer the proposal that through our contact tracing efforts and through our master schedule, that we know where students are. It's no different than right now when you have the football team out there practicing. They will be in school tomorrow amongst their peers. Right? We know where they are, and we can get our contact tracers on board to support and understand the extent of a possible transmission. Those are important CDC guidelines. I feel like we can work within them, and this is going to be the essence of how we move forward when we submit our plans to the state. It's important to know the following. We're very pleased with our schools and our staff's access to vaccination. More and more opportunities are given to schedule vaccinations. We know that masking is going to be the gold standard. We know that we just confirmed 1,500 COVID tests, so we can resume our in-house testing once we start in April. That should last us through June. We have enough to get us at least through June. And again, I just want to reiterate the importance of contact tracing and how we can make sure that if there is an infection, we can trace it with the same diligence and the same collaboration that we've had with the county to make sure that we're mitigating and managing any infections that do come to fruition. And we will be submitting or resubmitting our return to school plans to the New York State Education Department, hopefully by April 5th. That's our goal. Again, Monday, April 19th is our target date. This is when we are preparing to return to school. we know that there's going to be some hard decisions to be made. We know that this will not make everyone happy. There may be some things that we wouldn't be doing in a normal year. We are no longer offering hybrid instruction. There will be in-person learning 5 days a week and online learning. It's not practical or sustainable to add another model to the mix. In our K-5 community, there will be classroom assignment and teacher changes. And in 612, they will be meeting with students daily, synchronously. This has implications. I've communicated with families personally via a letter this afternoon, because as we have been talking about this, it's important that they hear this first. I'll be sharing this with the greater community tomorrow. I've also shared a similar letter outlining what we're trying to accomplish or where we are in this process with our virtual teachers who are in the K-5 realm. We believe the benefits of returning outweigh the detrimental effects of staying out of school. I'm always asking, as we have throughout this entire process, that we are flexible, patient, and always focusing on the bigger picture. And that is easing our students back into school and building stamina as we move forward. This has got to be about addressing the social emotional needs of our students as well as their academic needs. But first and foremost, the transition and becoming acclimated is the priority. Their social emotional wellness. We know if they're not feeling comfortable and safe, it's going to be challenging to get to the learning. We're hoping that we could do this well and do it with great effectiveness to prepare for the fall. Wouldn't that be great if we were able to get through this spring, get 10 weeks of school in, and then when the fall comes in, our students would have had that honeymoon period, and our staff, just as important, out of the way. We know that as we come upon April 19th, teacher planning days are needed. We also know that we need to ease students back into the building as well as our staff to build that stamina. We also are planning and anticipating hiring substitute teachers for our virtual teachers for online learners at this point, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that very soon. We're looking for teacher aides and teachers assistants to support our buildings as well, because there's going to be a lot of needs that and levels of support that need to be given to our students and staff as we return. Again, here are our priorities: the social emotional well-being of our students. It's about acclimating and getting our students and staff used to the normal again, and prioritizing their well-being, habits of mind, learning routines, and building that stamina. Students haven't gone to school for multiple days, and they're going to need to build that stamina. We're not accelerating the curriculum to fill in learning gaps. We know that the year that they've been out is not going to be remedied in the last 10 weeks. More is definitely not better. We should give students every opportunity to be successful. That doesn't mean that they're just given passing grades, but it means that we create strategies and systems to allow them to be successful. If it means extending deadlines, we will and have done this throughout the pandemic. We will continue to do that because our main goal is to keep students moving forward, let them get some rhythm and pace back into their life. The assessments should be purposeful and informative, so when we come to school in the fall, we know right where they are. It will inform planning on where we need to start with our curriculum in the fall as well. Here's an important timeline, and then we'll be transitioning to Aaron Smith, our Director of Buildings and Grounds, to talk a little bit about ventilation, and then Dr. Peter Lawrence will be talking about transportation. But here are the dates. Tomorrow, today's the special board meeting. Tomorrow there's a voluntary staff meeting to provide a similar update to our staff. We're also looking at a virtual community meeting to share where we are through our district YouTube Live channel. And there'll be a final survey sent to parents to confirm placements and transportation requests. As mentioned, planning is important. Teachers are starting all over again. We rarely have started the new year in May. We'll have full groups of students together. Planning will be important. The first day of planning will be on April 16th, recommended. It's an asynchronous learning day for students and a planning day for staff. And they'll be focusing on physical spaces and planning the first days of schools with both cohorts. On the 19th, they'll come to school, full return, in-person and virtual learning. And on the 21st and the 28th, in the spirit of helping them build stamina and helping the teachers as well to sort of catch their breath, understand where they can make adjustments so they can assess the first days of school, make adjustments and plan further, and again, building stamina as we move forward. Those are the suggested dates that we've been talking about. There's no good date because there's always something that needs to be an event or annual review, but our priority is to get our students and our staff in and to provide the planning so they can move forward the last 10 weeks of the year. At any point in time, this is a free-flowing exchange too. I know that you won't hesitate to ask questions. There'll be some themes that you'll be hearing from our administrators who are here tonight. Thank you very much for all your leadership and your presence and your accessibility. And I know that they'll be excited to answer your questions as we move forward. But Aaron Smith, our Director of Buildings and Grounds, is here to talk a little bit about classroom distancing and ventilation.
So Brett, before we get into Aaron, looking forward to it, but I do have some high-level questions. I don't know if it's now the right time to start throwing these out there, or we want to wait for...
If I get a sense that it's going to be answered within the next few moments,
Okay.
absolutely, I'll
All
let
right.
you know that, but go
Well,
ahead.
so some immediate issues are obviously Mendoza and Bello are not supporting it unless New York State Department of Health supports it, and, our need both pragmatically and legally on making a decision, right? So submitting our plan on April 5th, and we have to talk about the hypothetical that
Damon, can you turn on your
if
microphone?
New York State DOH doesn't approve our plan, what are we prepared to do at that point?
Is your microphone on underneath?
I believe it is.
Yeah, it's blue.
Yeah, close enough.
Yep. I think that's the essential question. We are
Right.
planning, we are getting ready, and we know that the CDC guidance is what it is. And, I'll work closely with our legal counsel as well, be sharing information that it will be important to help inform our next steps. But we are planning and we are moving forward. And hopefully, the state and the county can get themselves organized and not have this finger pointing going on, because our main imperative right now is to get our students back to school. And that will be a point of conversation. I think it's a question that's out there. I do know that if you look at our K5 or K6 groups, it aligns perfectly with the CDC guidance, right? We are ready to do that 100%. Our 7-12, if we are in a high transmission rate, again, my proposal of contact tracing and our ability to understand where our students are, I'll be making a proposal to make that a viable strategy to support our school community. Those are our facts, and that question is the important one. But at the end of the day, the CDC guidance, it's not tied up in the finger pointing, and I know that that's been an entity that we've looked at throughout this entire journey, but I think that's going to be the conversation for the board.
An important one, right? I think we need to be prepared to say, okay, we don't have approval from New York State, we don't have approval from the county, but we've submitted a plan and we're ready to go, and we just do it anyway, right? So that's the choice, right? So we need to make sure that we're ready to do that. My other question is regarding, I know you had submitted a window of the 19th of April to the 2nd of May to return to school, but it looks like here it's 19th for everybody.
Yeah, I'm feeling confident that, we're on that pace.
Okay. And then I have a lot of concerns about the virtual teaching at the secondary level. And, I know that we have to do it because that's all we are capable of doing for the last couple of months of the year, but I'm concerned about our strategy for the fall. And understanding that if I've got a room full of kids and I've got 5 kids remote, those 5 remote kids are not going to get a good, impactful education experience during that time. It's just not tenable long-term for us to continue that strategy. And so, it looks like we've recognized that it's an issue at the elementary levels, and we've hired virtual teachers to take on that level. Because I think that if you are a virtual teacher 100% of the time, and we saw that last week at Brooks Hill, it's a very good experience. The teachers do a great job. But if I've got 20 kids in front of me in the room and 5 virtually, those 5 virtual kids are just not going to have the same experience, right? And it's just not possible. So it's not good for the students in terms of providing that equitable education experience. It's also not good for the teachers because it's an immense amount of stress that goes along with that. So, I don't know that we need to tackle this long-term issue right now, but that's a big concern that I have in how we prepare for the fall, right? And we need to have a solution for that.
So, yeah, short term, our commitment remains, and you're right, the sustainability of that needs to be developed, and we understand that. There are different entities out there. I know that BOCES has a model. We'll be ready to prepare.
So we're also, you said that Tom's looking at other districts and
Yeah,
how
we're
they're-
going to be looking at using our instructional coaches and our technology experts, creating opportunities to go visit other schools that are doing it different ways as well. So that's going to be the future work, the sustainability work.
Okay, so from a very pragmatic perspective, at the secondary level, all the schedules are done for the fall, right? All the class
No,
schedules.
I mean, that's in development. When our secondary friends come, they could definitely,
Okay.
develop that.
Okay.
I know that that's part of their conversation as well. So that will be a theme throughout the evening.
Brett, it's me.
Sorry, I'll back out of the way. sorry.
No, I know that when we did the survey, were there more students that were virtual at the high school and middle school level that wanted to come back full-time from virtual? Like, did you see any difference?
Is there a middle school administrator or a high school administrator that want to come? This is great. I love it.
I just am curious if how much of
Free-flowing.
an impact it would
They can speak
be.
directly to it. They've interacted with the data personally, so.
Can we maybe hold that?
Yeah, I was gonna say, if that's part of their presentation, it's totally fine.
Okay.
I'm just thinking it might not be a huge impact depending on numbers.
It's a very important question, but the ventilation is incredibly important. And then the distancing pieces will be discussed.
I think when it gets to a question like that, Erica, I think when it gets to a question like that, all 3 cohort areas will have comments on that.
Yep, totally fine.
It's not wanting to keep Aaron's name here, but you're doing a great job.
Podium's nice and stable.
Right, a couple questions as well, though. Contact tracing proposal, like it overall. The CDC, I don't believe, has changed its guidelines on exposure. Is that right? It still is 15 minutes unmasked. Therefore, we're not worried about hallway passing and having to worry about those things, right? So that takes that off limits, and we know where they are with their schedules. So contact tracing.
We're worried about it,
Well,
but we're managing it.
right, differently. We have the,
CDC is 15 minutes over a 24-hour period.
right, it's not continuous. It's
Right, so over a
so,
24-hour period.
second, because of the kind of the power vacuum or silence going on at the state level, it's not entirely surprising that New York State DOH has not come out and said anything. I don't know that there's any direction. What was a very proactive governor is now suddenly very silent in this area of managing the COVID situation, so there's no direction. Assume that's the case, are the executive what do they call it? Executive mandates, whatever, that have the force of law, that allow the budget director, for example, to withhold on a daily basis funds, state aid, right, for each day in which we're not in compliance. Will that apply if we decide to move forward with this plan?
The executive orders are still in effect.
Position?
They're still in effect.
They do not expire?
They expire, I thought.
I have a written document that I'll be sharing with the board from are certain components of the executive orders that live.
I know his authority expired, but not, that's why I'm wondering, does it sunset at a certain date? What's our risk in terms of loss of state aid should we move forward when everything's silent at the state level? Because I overall advocate for that, but I want to know if we make such a decision, what risks are we deciding upon to accept?
Some of those executive orders do have cutoff dates. You know, when we're looking at the village, there are certain things that they do have expiration dates, some of them. But
Well, that's the specific one, right, where it gave the budget, I think, the budget director the authority to withhold, to penalize.
Correct.
By the day,
Right.
for every day we're out of compliance.
We have, and like Brett said, he'll share that with us.
But I think these are the right questions, and I think that as we are in public sessions and have these conversations, that we're going to be needing to answer them.
And not a well-known fact either about those types of penalties that exist out there.
You would think that politically that would be a very
I think so, right?
controversial
That's
thing
why I
to
say
withhold funds, but
we can potentially make that decision. We just have to know we accept, if we make that decision, that that's a risk we would potentially have to,
Right. And we also know Albany right now is trying to get a budget by April 1st.
Right, yeah. That's going to be fun.
no, not quite yet. But maybe this is something we want to wait for Mr. Clark to be up, but I do have a question about the Regents exams at the high school level, because in a normal year, if we have a Regents exam for a subject and a child does not pass the Regents exam, they go to summer school, I believe.
So you don't want to steal, I don't want to steal all their thunder, so that will be something they'll be addressing.
Okay, all right, great. I can't wait.
Really?
Wait.
Hey, I better talk fast. All right, so this is bullet points, and then we'll get into a little more of the meat and detail, and certainly ask any questions that you have. I'm currently working with our design team, LaBella Associates, to come up with detailed floor plans of every classroom in the district to give us a gridded spacing of how we can fit people into those spaces. I saw kind of a first draft of that today. I said, yes, I like it. Run with it. Of course, we've got 1.2 million square feet of building, so it's going to take them a little while to get us, every floor plan. But that is in the process.
So, quick question about that.
Yeah.
So, as you're looking with LaBella at the floor plans and you're designing, is any communication happening to the teacher in that room, actually, that this is the plan for the room?
Right now, all we're doing is seeing, can they physically fit based on these spacings? It's just a matter of square footage and square footage.
Right. With desks or with tables? Or both?
Desks. Right now, we're
Desks
targeting
everywhere.
desks.
No tables in the district at all?
That's not the target, but that's not. But again, that's not entirely true, because we have science labs, specialty tables. For safety reasons, you're not going to be replacing science lab tables with a standard student desk. So,
Science labs are science classrooms at this point. They're the same
right.
thing.
But
So
they also a lot of them have a lecture space.
Not really, but whatever. I'm just saying.
But
So,
like I said, I'll have a room by room of what we can fit and where we can fit,
and we're communicating that plan to the teacher in that room.
if necessary. Some teachers have it down pat already. I've walked
Right.
around.
I understand.
Yes.
Okay, and I'm not trying to be obstinate. I'm just saying it's necessary. In my mind, it's necessary,
Right.
right? Because that teacher is the professional in that room. They should know what the plan is that we've developed, and I think it's awesome what you're doing. But communicating to the teacher, letting them know what the plan is for their room, I think is really important.
Oh, absolutely. And at this point, it hasn't been communicated because we don't have the exact site to say. I don't want to scare people and say, I think this.
Okay.
When I go to them, I'm going to want to know the information. It's based on this square footage of these dimensions.
Right, but before April 19th, all the kids
oh,
pull in the room,
absolutely. Yeah.
the teacher will know what the plan is.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Absolutely.
Okay. Cool.
Aaron, your mic is on, right?
Yes, I'm probably not close enough.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Take it from me.
Yeah, I need to hold it like this, right? So that's the social distancing. Cleaning protocols, constant disinfectant and frequently touched surfaces. I know that right now people will see our custodial staff going up and down the hallways all day long, wiping down doorknobs, locker handles, drinking fountains, faucet handles, anything that's touched constantly. We're doing that all day long. Sanitized. Standardized cleaning practices, specific right down to the room. 24/7 and look at everything that's in that room and how we clean it and the process that we use. And then we've had a lot of upgrades in equipment and technology, electric sprayers and microfiber to increase our efficiency. I said this yesterday, and I'll say it again. I know Matt and I, we really focused around the efficiency of our operation. We did not hire additional cleaning staff to handle all this cleaning and sanitizing during the pandemic, which is not something that many other districts can say. Okay, we looked at efficiency within the operation because people are hard to come by. They have been for years, and this pandemic hasn't made it any better. And now the real concern, and something I could probably bore you all to sleep with for 2 hours, ventilation and air filtration. I'll get into a little more detail, but at the absolute minimum, we guarantee, because it is a standard, it's been a standard, 1 full air exchange every hour that a building is occupied.
What's our general capacity to do? How many air exchanges in an hour?
How many could we do?
Yeah.
Upwards of 7.
Under, but that's obviously temperature based.
Temperature based and everything else. Yes. Where'd it go? We are ventilating our space typically on a normal year. If the building opens up at 7 o'clock, just prior to 7, 6:30, 6:45, we would open the building so that it's warm in the wintertime or cool in the summertime just before they open. The recommended standard right now is 2 hours before opening. So we start ventilating our buildings at 5 a.m. ASHRAE standards also, and CDC recommends that you vent 2 hours past occupancy. We go to midnight every night, 7 days a week.
Just to confirm what I'm hearing, there's going to be somebody in every building opening up all the windows at 5 a.m.
No. This is mechanical cooling.
Okay, I'm sorry. So I know practice is all the windows get buttoned up at night, and it becomes very stale. Is there a way for us to open up the buildings prior to people coming in the morning?
Yes. So that got brought up yesterday as well in talking to some of the staff. I called it purge or fresh air harvesting. It's the Association of the American Association of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Engineers refer it to as energy recovery ventilation. So we actually have a program preset. I can a couple keystrokes. I log in. I set the whole district that will open up 100% 7 exchanges an hour all night long to bring in that cool, fresh air all night long, without opening windows and compromising security protocols. And then MERV filtration. It was a recommendation. We were so close to being that way across the board in the district anyway. We took that extra step and implemented MERV 13 air filtration throughout the district. That's what we're currently doing. So and a lot of our guidance comes from the CDC, which then gets adopted by the Department of Health, which then gets dictated to us by SCD, and they reference ASHRAE heating and cooling ventilation standards. And the 4 recommendations that they have are cooling 2 hours before the building opens up, running your exhaust fans during occupancy, which we do, a dedicated outdoor air system, which I generically call it the building management system or the day automation system. It's one feature that we have where it sets our minimum set points so that we get that fresh air exchange under all conditions. And then we have the energy recovery systems in place. And so all 4 of the major high points that's recommended by all the governing bodies, we're hitting them. That's really all I have, unless somebody wants more detailed information. Or if you think of something later.
Just in terms of the ventilation and filtration system, so every building is consistent with this capability, and you've got this all, I wouldn't say automated, but you've got remote diagnostics and ability to control the system, so
Yes.
you can, from a control panel, if you will, you can understand
Right.
what's open, what's closed.
Right. And we get all sorts of alarms if something's not working properly, something shuts down, and we have a run indicator that says, maybe a motor failed, the run indicator will tell us, so we go check that out. Absolutely.
So yesterday you had a list of all the different partners that you had to bring these
Oh,
ideas.
goodness.
right?
Yes, okay, so, yeah, so with all of this information, again, this is not Aaron Smith's information, I'm just compiled it all. We've collaborated with LaBelle and Associates, ME Engineering, Day Automation, our BOCES Health and Safety rep, our safety rep from our New York State Insurance Reciprocal, Hilliard, which is a large custodial supply company, and they adopt international standards for cleaning and sanitation. And then, of course, there's the State Association of Schools Facilities Directors that we work constantly on. We have a listserv that we're hearing this, I'm hearing that, what have you heard? And we're getting our information from all over the place. So it's not just me and my opinion, it's collective data from all the best sources in each of the respective fields.
So it's work, and that's awesome. That's great. I'm glad that you're reaching out and getting information from everybody. It's getting towards May. It gets hot, right? And I know that it's just going to get hot. A lot of teachers bring fans into the rooms. Do we have any guidelines or best practices around fans and creating some circulation?
So, yeah, there are some very gray recommendations about the use of fans. The CDC, specifically, the CDC has said, you may consider the use of fans to help improve air circulation. So we can absolutely do that. We can open windows if necessary to make a more comfortable environment. You have to balance out the fresh air versus it's 95 degrees and it's stifling. Yeah, they can do that. Whatever helps make, because that's another thing. When it's 95 degrees outside, fresh air is 95 degrees. So we're going to have to use fans to help make it comfortable, or open the window to kind of move that a little more than rather than a kind of a needle point directed format through our ductwork. Absolutely. Anything else?
Dr. Lawrence, if you want to come up and talk a little bit about transportation.
You're welcome.
Good evening, Fairport Board of Education members, community members, and colleagues. So some information about transportation. Our transportation team has been working very hard getting not only the Wednesday transportation back in place, but also routing for anticipation of April 19th. So they're doing a great job. Schedules for the buses will be sent out electronically through Parent Square. Same thing that we did earlier for the start of the school year. April 12th is the date they will go, so parents, community members should be making sure they're live with their Parent Square, that it's not going to spam. And obviously, if they have any issues, they can also call us, but those will hit the mail by the 12th. We currently have about 50% of the routes done, and then we anticipate over the next week, the break week, to finish the rest of them. And then, obviously, childcare, we've put a email out to everyone. We've been getting childcare information back. So there again, if you're going to use childcare in the months of April through June, new transportation request is due. We'll send out childcare passes via the U.S. mail in time for the start of school on the 19th. We're going to be contracting out 3 additional buses to help with the loads. We anticipate obviously more student ridership and potential challenges with having more students ride and trying to cover more areas. So we'll have 3 additional buses. Masks will be continued to be worn on the buses. Again, we'll also continue to use the assigned seats for grades K through 12. Roof hatches will be opened or vented. And our bus cleaning protocols and practices are still the same. They're cleaned after the morning, midday, and afternoon routes. Commonly touched areas are wiped down in between runs. And then we do a disinfection on Wednesdays where they're all sprayed down from ceiling to floor, all the seat backs. The district, we're also going to send out a survey to parents, brief survey to find out, do you need the bus or not? So that'll also hopefully be able to get us to not waste a seat for someone for that one time that someone might need it. So we're going to encourage parents, if you're going to need the bus, by all means, use it. If it's only like a one time, you think that maybe your child's car might not start and you might need a seat, just call us. Or if for some reason you think, well, maybe 3 times the next couple months I'll need a ride, just give us a call or an email and we'll set up a bus. So we're trying to be as efficient as we can.
Peter, when do you
with
plan
that.
to send that survey out?
The survey should be in the next couple days, so hopefully by Friday.
Great.
Been working with Dan Koistic, who's great, so that should be coming out Friday.
Super, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Can you go again, please?
How,
Okay.
how many students are currently in a seat?
So that's,
Does it depend on families and stuff?
so currently our ridership is low. So, you know, some of the buses might have 8 people in the seats. We do try to pair up families where they sit together. The one thing, if we do have the full ridership, we need to be aware that we can have 2 people in the seat, possibly 3 with the elementary in certain ridership areas. But there again, it's going to be dependent on how many people drive, how many people ride.
Assigned seating is designed for the contact tracing and, right, when you say assigned seats K-12?
Correct, yeah, so the assigned seats definitely help should we need to do contact tracing. Deb Miles and her team and the school principals have done a phenomenal job with any contact tracing. Also happy to say that we haven't had, to my knowledge, any student-to-driver transmission or the other way. Anyone that's been ill has been usually an adult to an adult or however the student received it.
And many of your riders or transportation drivers, excuse me, have had access to the vaccine.
Correct. We have a very high vaccination rate amongst the drivers. I think there's maybe 2 that still need to get the vaccination that want it, so.
So in terms of traffic flow, I know that we had some issues in the fall with people, with a lot of parents driving their kids. And I know that, you know, a lot of the elementary schools have a separate entrance for the parent drop-off and pickup. And we saw a system at Northside last week where they've got an application where parents can check in, which has seemed awesome. But do you feel good about traffic flow issues and safety concerns and not having kids cluster up waiting for buses or being dropped off at separate entrances?
So that's a lot of questions.
Yeah, I know, I'm sorry.
So,
I have to breathe
do
now.
I feel good?
Yeah.
That's $1 million question. I could tell you if I think I feel like I'm going to win the lottery. I think that that's a major concern for our district is traffic flow. One of the challenges we have, if we have everyone on the bus, that could be great, but obviously our social distancing is a little challenge. Everyone wears masks, we clean, you know, the risks seem to be minimal. If we have everyone drive and the buses, we might not be able to get the buses into the school, which is going to add additional time. You know, I gave you the example of Dave Dunn yesterday. Dave will be calling me saying, Pete, where's the bus? Where's bus 555? And I'll say, Dave, it's on A-roll, you know, backed up trying to get in. Our schools just really, unfortunately, were not designed for the number of cars, you know, and vehicles that use them, and especially in this time. So it's going to be a challenge. You know, we've got the room on the buses. We encourage parents to use the buses when they can, and if they're not, they're going to have to work with the school, and above all, be patient, right? We're in the school zone, you got to be patient. Whatever the principals say, if it's come at this time, please don't come 45 minutes early. It revolves about everyone flowing and having traffic flow, and if it's stopped, it's just going to cause chaos for the whole community.
Have we modified bus stops and/or certain distances for bus pickup, or we ask kids to walk to school or to minimize the amount of traffic?
So, you know, it's like a plant. That's a great question, Damon. So the pickups don't seem to be so much of an issue, but at the older grade levels, at the high school and at the middle schools, parents can expect to see a little bit longer walk distances just so we can get our times down. We've got good weather, there's no snowbanks, you know, but as board members, you need to know that that's one of the things that we need to do is extend the distances. Otherwise, you're going to be saying, why do we have students on the bus for 1 hour and 15 minutes and they're only right around the corner?
So just understanding that, what we've done so far this year is kids are here on these days and here on these days, and we've got the buses picking up and dropping off kids at various places. All that's changing now, right? Potentially, right? So it's a lot of stress on families and kids. And so how are we communicating the plan for each child with their family so that they are comfortable, that they know what to expect?
Well, they're going to have the bus schedule a week in advance, so there's going to be some people that say, hey, I'm anticipating to ride the bus, or I need childcare. On April 12th, they might go, my God, this is great. I don't need childcare. I can save the money, and it's going to be changes. Or someone might say, oh, my God, this is not going to work for me. And so they're going to have a week to really process.
So you've also reached out to families regarding childcare arrangements, right? So you've really been doing the work. I don't want to put a percentage on it, but you're working your way through the routing process. Of course, there'll be clear communication. Tomorrow, we'll be in front of the public sharing similar information. If we need to create a reminder video, I know that we have wonderful students who would be willing to help us with that as well.
Damon, I've received a lot of emails with information and updates, so it's not anything coming out of the blue for parents. There has been lots of communication. I think they're being clear. If you read your email or Parent Square, you should get the information. So I don't think it will be a surprise to anybody.
Yeah, and when I send it out, it goes to everyone within the Parent Square system, so try to get the
I think
widest net.
That's a key point, and we may want to put on our district website or Facebook page or whatever, all of them, quite honestly, if you have questions, go to Parent Square, right? So people need to know, where to go, right? So if they go to the website, which still is terrible, quite honestly, I can't figure it out, but you just have to have a statement right there on the homepage.
Yeah, I mean, I think,
Sorry,
the devil's in the details, and I
Yeah.
know that our administrators who are dying to get up here as well, I think of,
Well, you shouldn't have told me to ask
I think,
questions.
well, I think our principals really speak to, transportation, expectations, and how to get ready and prepare for school. Yeah.
Because it all works as a group. It's not, Peter's not operating in isolation.
Yep. And we'll be working with the schools as we always do. They have troubles or hotspots, we work together to try to eliminate
And
them.
guess what? You could probably expect some, challenges and opportunities to collaborate and, again, the words are patience and grace. That's what it's been all year long. And as we return to school, I think those concepts are still alive and well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
I have a great opportunity now to ask our advisory groups. We're going to start with our K-8 friends, and we're going to ask Dr. Larson and Ellen Reed to come forward. They were facilitating these groups. I'm also going to ask our elementary principals to come up around in a distance fashion. So if you need to take the mic or to emphasize points in this conversation, that would be helpful. So if principals can sort of, again, space out up here, and just because we have a microphone issue of not a lot of them.
Thank you so much. And I think you'll find that some of the questions that are coming up, you'll find that we'll address some of them. We had the pleasure, Kristen and I, of working with the K-5 group, and actually all the groups, K-5, 6, 8, 9, 12, all talked about and worked with the same topics, and then we talked about how it affected that particular group. So I'm going to start with we met with our advisory group, and the first thing that we talked about was just the proposed transition plan, just in general. Coming back on the 19th, the 3 asynchronous days, and generally the response was positive, that the understanding that those asynchronous days were very important for teachers. And to your point, Damon, the first one is actually prior to the 19th, with the notion in mind that teachers are going to need to have time in their classrooms once they know what the configuration is going to be. So to your question to Aaron earlier, that was done purposely so that that's a day that teachers could actually do that. So I think that that's important. At K-5, I think the importance of building the stamina, the concept of having that Wednesday initially so that students are kind of building that capacity to come back to school full-time, I think was important. There was one specific concern, and it's a little confusing, but that first week, that first asynchronous day, that Friday, happens to be a week when the Tuesday, Friday cohort has Wednesday, what they're not coming. So it just happens to be, we might have to rethink that because that would mean that one cohort is coming to school one day that week. So that was just a very specific concern, which I think is important. Communication, parents were like key. We need to know as soon as we can that these are days that we will need to get perhaps childcare. So as soon as we can communicate, I think is vital in that sense. I think the other thing that it kept coming up in terms of, and I think this is supported by all, by teachers, by parents, was that importance of having that time to plan and collaborate together so that, and Kristen will talk about it a little bit more in terms of the instructional and what's going to happen, that having that time to actually work together is going to be really key. And that was well supported, I think, by everyone.
And Alan, if I could just interject.
Sure.
I think it's important also to remind everyone who's watching this that these 3 advisory committees had, how many parents on each advisory committee? There were 6 parents? Okay.
6 or 7, yeah.
So-
I think there were
so
6
there was-
parents
there
and
was-
one
There was
PTA.
significant parent input
Yes.
as well as teacher input as well as administrator input. So
Yes,
I
it was
think-
really a great, I think, mix of, and honestly, we had a lot of positive comments as they were leaving yesterday that it was well done, they felt heard, and what we tried to do, and you'll see here, there's still some questions, right? There's still some concerns, and that's part of, I think, what we want to share tonight. One of the things, and I think actually Dr. Finger shared, virtual teachers particularly, their classrooms are empty at the moment. You know, they're going to need a little time to really get their classrooms back together because there's nothing in them at the moment. And so those are things that we really want to think about. I think how the teachers use those planning days was a question too, and again, we'll want to be proactive about
Just to
that.
clarify, you're talking about virtual teachers currently that are going to be coming back into the classroom.
Right, they're coming back into a classroom that has not had children in it, and so those are the rooms that will need a little, maybe extra time to actually do some work on that. Transportation, of course, is the second topic, of course, very important, but again, a comfort level, I think, and the principals can probably speak to this. I will do it, and then if you feel like you need to add, I think what was important, again, the cohorting. You know, if you're a family, you sit together on the bus, or even neighborhood, if you're, you know, if you've been kind of potting together in your neighborhood, they felt comfortable coming back in that way. And the question of, so what happens if somebody actually has COVID, how do we do the tracing? And I think Peter did a great job explaining that's the idea of assigned seats. So I think there's a comfort level there to a certain extent. I think the building plans are going to be critical, and each building it's kind of nuanced because they all have different traffic patterns. They all have, you know, a different way of doing things, but principals were very clear in explaining that, you know, the system can work. If parents are going to have students ride the bus, or they're going to pick up, if they kind of follow the guidelines, if we say that and we can cohort so that we can have some staggered times, if we tell you to come and pick up at 3:05, a whole group can get through in a fairly efficient time. The problem is sometimes when parents come very early and there's a mess. So I think the more we can communicate that. The other thing is we actually had a parent who on the first night said to us, just tell us what we need to do. You told us in the fall that it was better if we actually drove. If you tell us now that it's better if we actually take the bus and we feel comfortable with that, of course, feeling comfortable with it, we'll do that. So I think parents are willing to give and take in terms of that so that whatever might be easier in terms of the traffic patterns and all. So I think that was an important piece too. And I think we said it several times, you might have to wait a little longer. You're going to have to be patient. We're going to do the best we can, and we'll get through it, but there might be some growing pains, and we'll have to deal with it. But again, very positive about it. You know, it wasn't anything that anyone, I think, felt tremendous stress over. Cafeterias. Well, the cafeteria conversation, I think, was one of the most positive because I think it's working now. Like, what the elementary folks are doing now is finding different spaces, having kids 6 feet apart, and that will have to continue. And they've collaborated with Michelle Rasavage and Food Services to extend the lunch time just enough so that they could do it for longer, not so much that it's going to be terribly disruptive. And I think that just continuing with that concept is going to continue to work for them. I think the other thing that I thought was fantastic was sharing that because they now schedule recess time, it's not, I'm going to eat and go out to recess. Kids are actually enjoying lunch. Like, I thought that was a great comment. Teachers shared it, parents shared it, principals shared it. Students are actually sitting, I'm enjoying my lunch because I'm going to go to recess later. I have that scheduled at a later time because everything has to be so scheduled. And that's actually been a real positive, and that, I think, will just continue. Any other thoughts, principals, in those three areas? Kristen will share some of the other pieces or questions or concerns about that. Again, I think some of it is redundant in terms of what Aaron and Peter shared as well.
So scheduling was one of the more difficult conversations because we all know that no one wants a teacher change. So it was really loud and clear from everyone's perspective in the stakeholder groups that the fewer teacher changes, the better. And so we really tried to figure out logistically, how can we make this happen? Because right now we're in hybrid and you're either virtual hybrid or you're in-person hybrid. So when we come to 5 days, if you stay virtual, you're 5 days, but if you're hybrid, you're 5 days. So we can't split the teachers to take half of a group. So when we really started to think about how can we work this out, it came down to the data. Let's take a look at the data. Let's take a look at the responses on the community survey and where are the fewest changes that would need to be made. And so if you're an in-person student choosing to go virtual, there are some that are choosing to leave the in-person model hybrid and move to virtual. There are also some students who are in the virtual hybrid choosing to come back in person 5 days. And so there were fewer students choosing to stay or move to virtual than there were in person. And so when you just look at in terms of numbers, and I know that doesn't help, especially parents that are choosing to stay virtual, what we think is probably at this point the best thinking in order to minimize the number of changes would be to have our virtual teachers across the district return to in-person instruction and bring with them their own students that they've had that are choosing to return to school in-person learning. So what that means is the teachers that have kids in their classes right now for hybrid would keep their classes, no teacher changes there. The teachers that are virtual, that have students returning to school, they would bring those students with them, so they would be in person with their students, which then, of course, means that our students that are virtual, staying virtual, or in hybrid in-person moving to virtual would unfortunately need to have a teacher change. And we know it's not a situation that anybody wants to be in, but we really are trying to figure out how else to manage that situation. So that's our current thinking around scheduling.
Kristen, just real quickly on that, so I know we're hiring 6 teachers, virtual teachers. I assume that's 1 per grade, K through 5, is that right?
Correct.
Okay, and then we're consolidating across buildings, so 1 virtual teacher for that grade level across the district.
That's the current thinking, yes.
Okay.
Again, the word is we're anticipating. We're still waiting for final numbers, but I think just to be proactive, you get those postings out. So if we do get to a place and it continues to trend the way we see it, we're ready to go and we're not behind.
Can you take us back to the last situation that you said is, a little bit more problematic?
So students that are currently in hybrid virtual, that are staying virtual, or students that are in-person moving to virtual. The numbers are low enough at the moment, given the data that we have, that it looks like we should be able to run 1 district-wide course of each grade. So 1 kindergarten virtual, 1 first grade virtual, meaning that those students, teachers will be back in the buildings teaching to the students attending in person. So those students no longer have a virtual teacher, which is why we were going to post for the K through.
And currently, Kristen, we've got per building 1 virtual teacher, K-5.
Correct.
So we're going from 18 virtual teachers down to 6, because 18 virtual teachers are going to be going into their classroom with the majority of their virtual students. And then we're going to have one virtual teacher, kindergarten, who is going to service Dudley, Brooks Hill, and Jefferson Avenue students.
Correct. There are 17, because one teacher in one building teaches
Okay.
2 grade levels,
Okay.
but yes.
Thank you.
Do the principals want to add to that? Because you're up close to the data. I know that, have we seen, the free flow throughout the past several months, actually?
Good evening. I'm Meredith Klustein, principal at Brooks Hill School. I'll just speak to it briefly on behalf of the 4 of us, and then someone else will get a harder question after me, so that's why I stepped forward. I know, right? The data, like Kristen said, is trending in that direction, and of course, we want parents to be able to hear this information and then give us the final decision before we want to move forward. But one of the trends was, of course, anytime you leave a comment box in a survey, then you have to look at the comments. It wasn't clear cut, like I want my child to be virtual, I want them to, be hybrid. If you looked at the comment box, there were many, many, many of our families that said, I want to return, but more importantly, I want my child to stay with the teacher that they're with. And so kind of combining factors, that's where we saw a real push back towards being in person. And of course, knowing what benefits that have for kids, we wanted to honor the fact that that was the trend. So like you asked, yes, we're moving basically from 17. I have a teacher that's teaching 1st and 2nd grade. That's an anomaly in that those 2nd graders that are with that teacher won't be able to move back with that teacher, but those kids will go to, current teaching teachers in my building. So yeah, we've looked at all that data and it's trending in that direction, and that's what we're hopeful to be able to have as minimal transitions as possible.
But those 2nd grade students will be able to see their teacher in the building.
That's
So
exactly
they'll
it.
be able to make some contact that way. So it won't
Yeah.
be every day, but they'll at least know that, oh, there's Mrs. Johnson.
That's exactly it, yeah. And we've done that throughout the year already. So as we have all worked to bring back students in with various scenarios, different reasons why students have already transitioned back, that's been one of the things that we've worked on for that social emotional piece, making sure that they have connections within the building. And the virtual teachers who are teaching in the building make it a point to go and welcome them back on their first day, even if they're changing teachers. So I can see a lot of that sort of transitional stuff occurring. We were talking today too, Brett and I were talking briefly about, if kindergartners choose to come back virtual, it would be their very first time that they would actually be a kindergartner in a building. And so some of the things that we can do to ease some of those transitions. So there's a lot we have in the works that we're thinking a lot about so that we can make it a best situation for as many students as possible. The caveat is what Kristen explained, which is there are those students who will want to stay virtual. We actually have very few students so far in the survey who want to go to virtual from hybrid. It's primarily folks choosing to stay virtual if they are, that are in that situation where we would hire for those positions.
So Meredith, though, if I'm a child that's either moving to
Your
virtual.
questions get harder, Damon.
I'm sorry, I'm not.
I
I
might
don't mean
tap
to.
out.
I don't mean to. I'm just,
Go ahead.
so if you've got kids that are moving from hybrid to virtual, or they're staying virtual, that's changing, right? It's not 2 days a week with a
It's
few
5
days.
days.
It's 5 days, right?
Right.
So it's a different rhythm, for
It's a
sure.
different rhythm, but.
And is it 9 o'clock in the morning to 2 in the afternoon, or?
No,
is
and it never has been. And,
Okay.
and I want to just make that really clear because I think we wanted our virtual model to look like what we would expect in the classroom. So it's very much built around there's time for play, there's time for breaks, there's time to have lunch. I mean, there are academic blocks for sure, but all the things you take for granted when you're in person, such as all the downtime and transitional times and special area and lunch and, play at the younger grades and just, interacting socially in the upper grades, we've built that into the virtual program, and we'll want to continue to do so, if not have a little bit more of that, if they're just trying to sustain 5 days on a piece of technology, right?
So, I mean, just my comment is, Tim and I were at Northside last week, and we saw, was it Melissa?
Marissa.
Teaching
Marisa.
a virtual class. It was unbelievable. It was so great. And I know that that's happening everywhere, so I just really, again, the key point is they weren't teaching kids in the classroom and those kids virtually. They were focused on those kids virtually,
Right.
but the impact and interaction was fantastic. You
And
could
this would
really-
be a great opportunity to send a huge shout out to those virtual teachers because they took on something they didn't even know what they were taking on at the time. And really across all 4 buildings, they've done an absolutely outstanding job, along with some of our special education teachers who have balanced both the in-person and the virtual at the same time.
Have the parents of our virtual students, have they been told that the teacher will be changing? Are they aware of that yet?
I would send out a communication this afternoon, because I knew that this was going to be a point of conversation today at this meeting, and will also be a point of conversation tomorrow. So the teachers were communicated to, and the families of virtual students were communicated.
I have a quick question. I should know this answer. Do we know how many in-person days the cohorts have had? So if I just look at one, does anyone know?
I feel like it's somewhere towards 40. Yeah.
Okay, so if we look at that, and then we think about if they're in, how many in-person days will they get moving forward? I'm just thinking in terms of,
I'm going to estimate, but I think
Yeah.
we counted it up, and it was something like they've been here 30 to 40, and they were going to have another 40 to 50.
yeah. So, I mean, in terms of acclimating and getting used to a new teacher, in theory, they really haven't been in person with the same teacher for that many days.
Right. Yep, that's a great point.
I have a question about the 6 virtual teachers. So how much, I know you've thought about this, and April 19 is like tomorrow. So what kind of planning are we doing to acclimate and really hurry those folk up as much as we can in terms of being, new? New teacher, doesn't matter right now in terms of virtual, et cetera, although it does, because a lot of people don't like teaching virtually. So, just really pulling them up to speed. Where are we with that?
Yeah, so I think a few things would happen. It was posted as a virtual position, so at least when we have people applying, they would know that that's what they're applying to. We also have 3 technology instructional coaches in the district. Certainly Travis Wood is an elementary, but we also have middle and high school, I'm sure, who would all be able to work with our 6 new teachers. In terms of curriculum and instruction,
Right.
we're, which I'll speak to as well while we're talking about this, if that's all right. But we have a pretty well planned out pacing calendar for this year, knowing that it was going to be minimal amount of days. We wanted to make sure that the days that the students were attending school, we were maximizing the major learning understandings for each grade level. So what we would do is we would have the ability to work with them in terms of what the students have left off with, exactly where to pick up with them, collaborate with the grade level teachers that are still teaching as well.
We had building level, or we had building subs, right? Long-term subs?
Yeah, so I was just going to come up and say, I would anticipate
Okay.
that if these positions are needed and filled, there's a very good chance that many, if not the 6, will be folks that are very familiar and already working within our buildings in certain capacities. And we'll just, it could be a building sub that moves into that role, and then, per diem subs move into the building sub roles, and just that ongoing domino effect. I'm not 6 people unfamiliar with what we've been doing and probably already working in virtual roles here in some way, shape, or form.
I'm thinking once we make that determination, how many teachers are necessary, I think it'd be important to get those teachers on board as soon as possible, so they could start co-teaching with the current teachers, so that the students have that transition, and they see that the 2 teachers are working together, and the new teacher knows what the old teacher has been doing and is doing and has done. So I think that will really help with the transition for those students who are going to remain remote.
Great idea.
So hence, we're we're being proactive, and that's why we're getting that out. And it's important that we are planned and organized and ready to support. There's our technology coaches. We also have our instructional coaches who do incredible work with the curriculum pieces at the elementary. And of course, our lead teachers are there to support. Wrapping all these great experts that we have, hopefully, I know that we can make it a positive experience.
So is this a April through June strategy, or is this a format or structure you're putting in place for the fall as well?
It's in April through June.
And so we start over in the fall?
Well, obviously, I think we do the best we can planning
Yeah.
for full as much as normal
Yep.
in-person return in the fall as
All right,
possible.
okay.
Just to speak to the curriculum aspect, because I think it is really important. Going into this year, knowing that we were going into hybrid, we worked with the grade levels and the instructional coaches to develop calendars for the year that essentially met what we felt were the most important takeaways for each grade level. We also, I can speak to math in particular, brought in a new program this year, Math Expressions, which has actually been so wonderful to be able to have, because we know that every classroom is teaching the same concepts in the same week with the same strategies. And so we know exactly what content our students have received K through 5, which helps us then plan for, obviously, the transition into 6, and then for being able to determine what we need to do next year in terms of adjusting scope and sequence. So we do plan on working with the departments, K through 12, to determine what we were able to do this year and what we need to make adjustments for next year. I think it's really easy sometimes to think about, we've had a year and a half of interrupted learning. Let's now that the kids are back, let's try and catch up. And we want to be really careful that the pile everything on and try and catch up in a year and a half, in 3 months, is not the approach that we take. We want to make sure that our students are feeling loved and welcomed, and that we're meeting their mental health and social emotional needs. We're, of course, going to continue to focus on instruction, but we do not plan on adding in new learning targets. We plan on continuing to meet the learning targets that we set for the year, having more time to go deeper into the concepts, having time now with, if the state assessments are given, just being able to kind of start as if it's a new school year, because both cohorts will be together, and continue to move through the curriculum that we've already set.
That was a priority of your focus groups,
It
correct?
was indeed, yes.
So you said, Kristen, you said if the state exams are given, meaning we don't know yet.
We're planning on as if they will be,
Okay.
until we know we have a waiver. There is a waiver that New York State has submitted to U.S. Department of Education. We have not.
Okay.
But just
yeah.
book one, right?
What's that?
Just just book one, so not the entire thing.
Correct. It's now shortened to just book one, so there's no constructed response for math and ELA. There will be a couple constructed responses on the science if it
Okay.
moves forward. But
And
yes.
just from a district perspective, I assume that we're just using that as a check-in, right? To see where the kids are at, and we're not really dramatically emphasizing the high-pressure element of these exams in terms of.
We have a lot of built-in measures to make sure we know where students are as they end this year and move into next. So we feel confident that we're able to meet the kids where they are, move them forward next year, given the learning.
That's well stated. Anything that we do internally is much more powerful. Nothing has changed as far as, our approach with those state assessments.
And that is K5.
Anything else from our elementary principals? Any of you have anything you'd like to share to enhance what Meredith so well stated?
Yeah, do you
Damon,
guys
you got any hard questions?
Well, I was just going to say, is there anything you're concerned about? Is there anything you're worried about, excited about?
I think I can speak for all of us. We're excited. Oh, yeah,
Sorry. Make sure the blue light's on.
Yes, it's on. I think I can speak for all of us that we're excited to reopen the doors 5 days a week when given the opportunity. We feel good about our collaboration together, and as Kristen and Ellen nicely said, there's nuances in each building, but feel really great about food service. That would include lunches, breakfast, and snacks, and plans for that. Transportation is definitely, I think our biggest concern, but we know that we can work together with the parents, and flexibility and patience. And as Ellen had mentioned, parents said to us in the focus group, we drove our kids in September because that's what you asked us to do, so please tell us what you need. So I do think it's imperative that we're very transparent in communicating to parents exactly what the cleaning procedures are on the bus, the masking protocols, so that they can feel confident and comfortable if they choose to put their child back on the bus, because we know more students riding the bus would really help all of our buildings at dismissal.
And Aaron, as you mentioned to us when we were there last Friday at Northside, you said it was so nice to be able to hear a teacher say, "I'll see you tomorrow."
See you tomorrow.
That was the
Both
first time
cohorts
the
have
entire.
been able to say
right,
that to now
The entire
because
school year. You
they've
really-
had back-to-back days on the
Right,
Wednesdays.
and it's like, whoa, we haven't said that all year.
Yes.
So
we're
thank you.
ready.
Thank you all. Thank you
Yes.
all.
I'm going to ask Deb Miles to come forward and Mr. Henson, Kevin Henson. They were our facilitators for the 6-8. And I think Mr. Dunn, Mrs. Shore, and Mr. Grower are here, and they're going to approach the other microphone to complement this conversation.
Good evening. All right, can you hear me well? All right. So I don't think you're going to hear a whole lot different, right? It's just sort of the same issues, the same concerns, same considerations, just a little bit bigger children. So as we look at the proposed transition plan, one of the things that really came across strongly at the middle school level is the social emotional aspect for the kids. And so you see a couple of times under the transition in a couple of different places that readiness to return to school 5 days a week, right? The executive functioning skills, the ability to be able to manage 5 full school days, extracurricular activities are back in place with athletics and homework, right? So they've had an entirely different aspect of their education this year by having a day on, a day off to do homework, you know, a half day in the morning of just popping on for 20-minute virtual lessons, and then another half day for homework. And then in some cases, another full day of homework before they kind of return to school, like their 2-day cohort. So that's a big transition for kids to then try to shift back to the 5 days and manage the workload, the organization, and so forth. So I think the message from our group is really just keeping all of that in mind, making sure that we're communicating with our families to help with any kind of guidance we can give them about helping students return to school-based routines, you know, appropriate bedtimes for 5 days a week, study habits for 5 days a week, all of those types of things. It's important that we find time in our days to give natural breaks for the students, whether they're mindfulness breaks, whether they're just an opportunity to kind of just, you know, check out for a few minutes and take a break, or even opportunities to just connect with adults and, you know, hit that social aspect of how are we doing, you know, check-ins kind of thing. Teachers certainly were, teachers and parents alike were certainly still concerned in wanting us to think really in terms of the synchronous piece at the secondary level versus a virtual program. And so, Damon, you mentioned it earlier, they share the same type of, you know, concerns regarding 18 kids, 20 kids physically in your classroom, 4 or 5 kids up on your screen. In some cases, there may not be any virtual kids because there is, again, 88% of our kids returning to school in person. But for those classes and sections where they are having to balance both, they know that's a different type of teaching. They know that that takes a whole different skill set. And while they've been doing that throughout the year, it does weigh on them. There is a whole, you know, different level of stress that comes with that. So just keeping all of that in mind in terms of how we organize that master scheduling at our middle school level, and whether there's an ability to, you know, you have 4 sections maybe of in-person and a section of virtual, if that's an easier way to manage it. You know, I think our building principals are open to some of those ideas.
From my perspective, Deb, I think that that's an important topic to really think about. And obviously, we have 2 months in the spring to think about. And I have friends in other districts that their kids have been virtual and they've been tied in synchronously to in-person classes. And their satisfaction as parents is not very good, right? It's just their children, they feel like their children are an afterthought. And you can sympathize with that because if you've got 20 kids in the classroom and a few virtually, it's just kind of the way it is. So I am concerned about that. And then I know that we're not thinking about the fall right now, but I think about, you know, we have to keep in mind, what are we prepared to do in the fall? And I'm concerned about the teachers as well, right? Because
The sustainability of that model is of concern. I know Mr. Groh wants to say something, but I just want to reiterate, yes, we're in the throes of this right now, but we are committed. I know the board is also looking for a sustainable model as we move forward. And we're going to be studying it. We'll be talking more about it in sessions just like this. But Mr. Groh, can you add to some of these thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. And Deb is saying a lot of great things just about how we're trying to do it. And Damon, you're absolutely right about not being a perfect model. I will say, just in Dave and I, we speak daily, certainly about what's going on now and what we're planning for later. And the model we're using right now with the teachers and the virtual kids linking in is not perfect. Our teachers are killing themselves on it, trying to make sure they're doing the best to keep those kids especially engaged and trying to go out of their way for it. When Brett does his visits to school, when I'm popping into rooms, we're really trying to make sure we're making that effort to make sure those kids know we know they're there, we know they're trying, we know they're working. And we certainly know if we do come back fully, the 5-day-a-week, 40 minutes in each class on a virtual kid is going to be a tremendous, tremendous struggle for those kids at home, just sitting on a meeting, on a computer for that long during the day too. At this juncture, I think it'd be really tough if we try to even switch gears on it, simply for the fact, blowing up a kid's schedule, for lack of a better term, to switch teachers and go from there could be really difficult. To try to do it like Deb suggested, ideally, it'd be perfect because you can teach a virtual class with virtual kids just on that so much better and so much easier. But at the same time, I think we got to try to find out with all our kids, we're hoping to get some more back. Our virtual kids coming back too. We've been really, really fluid all year. We've been lucky enough. We've been trying to have those kids access the in-school if necessary. And we know that's not feasible for everybody. We know it's tough. We know parents have really good reasons for staying virtual for their own, confidence sake and all that. But we want to make sure what we're doing is the best for everybody we can. We're trying to schedule some time, and it came up yesterday in our advisory meeting too. How can our teachers maybe give some extra time to those virtual kids, even if they're still cameraing in during the class? And that's what we're trying to work out now too. As we look at logistics and look at numbers and how it's going to shake down on the schedule, is it going to be 4 kids in the class and 2 kids in the class for each teacher? We got to work it out and see when those numbers come. So again, I know Brett's survey is going to be so important for all of us in the building levels to get that commitment from parents of what they want to do so we can plan accordingly. And we'll keep working to try to make sure they're engaged. I think that's been, I know Dave has said it over and over and over again, those kids are virtual and our kids. It's the mental health of their coming back, staying in, feeling connected. That's what we're trying to do, and we'll continue to do that.
I appreciate that. I think we ask a lot from our teachers, right?
Definitely.
And we get it, right? They're outstanding. I'm not trying to be biased or one-sided, but I think when we say, well, we're just going to ask our teachers to do a little bit more,
Yeah.
and a little bit more, and a little bit more, it's to the point where we can't ask for more, right? We have to do things differently, right?
Yep.
So I would just really encourage us, think out of the box, think about, I don't think we can ask more.
No, and that's true, and this is with conjunction with our staff. They're the ones that are on the committee here too, and we know, and they know too, the change for kids right now, any change is going to be difficult. Especially even though our model is not perfect, we've worked out a lot of kinks. The kids are in a fluid pattern right now too, where they're feeling okay about it. And so it's not about saying, just give it to teachers, they'll do more. They've done more than their share and more than enough, and they've been fantastic all year. But we're trying to make that balance so it's good for the kids, easy to manage for the kids, while manageable for our staff as well.
What's the percentage of kids coming back from virtual to in-person? Does anyone know what the percentages were, like at elementary, middle, high? I can't remember with that initial survey.
Thank you. I have Martha Brown's percentages. We started the year in September, 17% virtual, 122 kids. Over the last 25 weeks, we whittled that down to 72. And that drop has been a lot of parent conversations, administrative conversations, counseling conversations around what's the best way for your child that maybe had not been engaged to re-engage. So I know I took a look at the survey results that we got last week, and I think they predict about a 10% overall all virtual enrollment district-wide. Well, we're about 12% right now. So for us, that 2%, we're going to maybe bring back about a dozen kids across 3 grade levels. So that's what we're anticipating. We're anxious for the survey for a final commitment, because that way it'll definitely give us an idea of how many desks do we have for the teachers to really establish. And, our work next week, Damon, over the break will be to actually work with our custodial crew and Aaron, and we're going to actually create, what the classes are going to look like. We'll give the teachers a couple of weeks to kind of take a look at it and kind of rework based on what they need to do, not necessarily rework the student desks, but their teaching stations and stuff. So they'll definitely be a part of that planning for the 2 weeks prior to the kids coming. And just to go back to the all virtual, again, we do have a different model than the elementary, and it's ironic that it's under the master scheduling topic, because it is a master scheduling function. Brett came to all of us last August. And, what are the chances of, coming up with some all virtual sections? And I think all four of us at all four secondary buildings said, couldn't do it. I mean, we've been working on the master schedules, probably the high school, for 4 or 5 months when that time came. And it would have been a complete rework of the master schedule to make it work. So we did our best. We tried to balance as much as we could the cohorts within the classrooms. But Damon, you're absolutely right. If you were to ask any, I'll just say middle school teacher, what is the most stressful part of their job for the last 25 weeks? It's been that dual role where 8 kids in person, maybe 4 or 5 on the screen. And when we come back April 19th, and I know they'll handle this, but it's going to be not 8 kids, but like 19 kids and maybe 3 or 4. So, our teachers have been amazing. And they've really kind of found a way to kind of pull through anything. And I'm really thankful for the planning days. I'm thankful for the 2 consecutive Wednesdays during the first 2 weeks where they'll actually be able to say, okay, I've already had 2 days now. What do I need to do differently? And our teachers are rock stars. I know it's stressful, but I also know that anything we put in front of them, they've found a way to navigate through.
And Dave, right now, and Pat, it's not every teacher, every period has 2 or 3 virtual kids, correct?
It's not every teacher, every period, but it's every teacher. I'm going to say at least 2, 3 out of 5.
Okay, so,
Yep,
okay.
yeah.
And that might go down to maybe 2 periods.
That might go down to 2.
Right,
Yeah,
okay.
we were able to do some cohort collapsing
Right,
early on
right.
to help out with that. But
So that you only had 1 or 2 and that was it? and
Right.
That was your concentration?
Right.
Okay.
But our teachers are such high-level achievers that they want that same level of connection, engagement, instruction for those 3 or 4 students on screen as the students in the classroom. And that's why they're so stressed out, because they're really working very, very hard to do the best they can to accomplish that. And anytime we get a chance to walk around, Pat and I will always pop in and say hi to the students on screen, and I always feel good about their level of engagement from what we see. The teachers are always tuned in, and they kind of find ways with the laptop to connect the kids with the classroom. So they're doing their best.
Yep.
But Brett, you're totally right. It's not sustainable long-term.
Yep.
And that'll be our job for
Yeah,
the future.
the difference now when we go back, we have most of the kids back in the classroom, is that I don't have a classroom of 8 kids
Yep.
with 5 virtually, where
Right.
it's relatively divided. I've got 19 kids.
Correct.
And I've got 3 remote, right? And so, managing a classroom of 19 kids
Right.
is like, that's 100%, right?
Sure.
So that's the concern. And,
Right.
the equitable experience for the kids at home as well, and the sanity and sustainability for our teachers.
Sure.
As well as the cost of the district to employ the number of people. So we
Yep.
really have to think about this going forward.
A compliment to Deb and our facilitators for the middle school bands. I mean, they listened, and when they collaborated, Kevin, they took the feedback and the thoughts, and it was a nice opportunity for at least have their voices be heard. And Deb hit it nail on the head, absolutely, the social emotional piece. We're going to have to almost come up with a strip for the teachers so that they don't get, too focused on the content, and really make sure that we capture these kids where they're at. That'll be our work for the next 8 weeks or so. But thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question though, about that duality in terms of the teacher, live versus, we used to say Memorex, us old people, if you remember what that's about. Live versus Memorex, okay. So in terms of trying to be Memorex with the virtual kids, how are the teachers feeling about the technology in terms of, how, in fact, how good, in fact, is the technology for them to be able to divide themselves into 2?
They've done a great job this year of learning a lot of new things tech-wise, from the webcams to, when we go in, we're seeing some of the kids on the big screen and the teachers presenting with the camera on them and seeing some of the kids live. And we've given the liberties to the teachers to set up with the way they feel most comfortable, where they feel they can do the most for the virtual kids and the in-person kids. So it's not exactly like every classroom could look a little bit different, and we've had some teachers, we walked into a science class a couple weeks ago and they were doing the frog dissection, and right on the camera, that's what the kids were seeing at home, and they're talking them through it as it's going. So we're trying to make that experience as good as possible and as live as possible. So I think from a tech side, I think our teachers would say they've grown leaps and bounds on it. And the tech coaches we've had this year have done a really, really good job at the different levels, trying to support them. And they ask questions, but they have it. But I think our teachers are coming out this even better than they were before with some new skills on this carrying forward.
But to just piggyback on that, in the fall, back into the summer, when we decided that we were going to use Google as our platform, there was a long growth pattern there for our educators. So our tech coaches really dug deep in there. And there were days, like, for example, I was at a couple classrooms where the teachers were collaborating with one another to make sure it was working or not working, and they asked me to run to one room while they were in another room to see if they could, do that. But they have grown leaps and bounds, I think, in terms of that, and have collaborated so well. Not to say that there still aren't glitches here and there, but I think between, last June and now, many of them have grown and are really, really comfortable, at least managing the technology piece of it.
But beyond just the management, what about the level or the sophistication, I guess, in terms of the technology that we have? Have you had some conversations, with them and others about, updating or, having better formats and so forth, platforms?
I mean, that didn't come up in our particular grade band in terms of it being the bigger issues. That was really not their number one concern. They feel like
Okay.
they've gotten a lot of professional development through Kevin's office, but also through the tech coaches. They have, come to grow and understand how to use the system to their benefit. So.
Looks like Mr. Dunn wants to add to that. I think
I
he
was
can.
just going to add one thing. We got new webcams, almost every teacher's classroom within the first month of school. And that just kind of like opened the whole classroom up to those students on the screen. And the teachers just gave rave reviews. We thought we were going to be buying microphones for every student, or every teacher, and those webcams had such powerful microphones and cameras that I really think that made them feel that much more influential with the kids. Because the webcam really, depending on how you would position it, would really show the whole classroom.
And I know that I can provide a report very soon that expresses the amount of professional learning that has taken place, how we've used different tools to acclimate and to produce effective instruction. And it does lend itself differently to different disciplines as well. I said it in the past, math teachers versus a social studies lesson that, or a hands-on lab activity. It just presents itself differently. But I'll look forward to having our instructional technology director, Tom Devitt, come forward with data. The coaches can also be a part of the conversation to really give you pointed feedback as to how how our staff has grown and how they become effective in this realm. And hats off to our staff who've really owned it and tried to make the most out of this situation.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Dave had mentioned the asynchronous days, and that actually ended up being a nice compromise for our grade band. We had a really lengthy discussion about transitioning back, 4 days first and then 5 days eventually. So the use of the asynchronous days for teacher planning, as well as giving kids that opportunity to ease into a full 5-day week, was thought as a positive. So then if we shift to transportation, again, not very different. Supervision of students on the bus in terms of masking, et cetera. Obviously, we know our buses are driven just by a driver. There are not a lot of, aides and additional adults on the bus. So really just making sure that our students are doing the right thing in that regard. Making sure that we're putting siblings together whenever possible on the buses in terms of those assigned seats. Open communication in terms of, Peter, which we know we will have, collaborating with our building principals about the ridership and the number of kids, and then being able to certainly manage the parents that are driving. We considered staggered pickups and drop-offs, as well as like JP possibly using Minerva DeLand's parking lot because their dismissal is earlier, so maybe the parents could be over there while the buses are at the school, whatever opportunities there are to kind of alleviate some of that congestion. And then consider additional staff needed for supervision on the bus loops and out around the cars and parking lots. And then in terms of our cafeterias, locations that are conducive to student flow to and from the cafeteria when getting lunch. Consideration, of course, of supervision. Obviously, again, they like the way they have their lunchroom set up right now. The lunchrooms, if you think about probably, where we're going to have the most risk of any kind of spread, it's when we're unmasked, right? So the lunchrooms are where we're unmasked. So it's really needing to keep the social distancing in there, limiting the amount of time kids are, eating and getting those masks back on for the social aspect of the lunch period. The nice weather, getting those kids outside where possible for, a break.
Is there consideration for allowing kids to eat lunch outside?
I mean, JP is a little bit more amenable to their location. I don't know, Dave, you can speak to Martha Brown's, lot in terms of how that works, but I think, yes, overflow areas are being looked at.
We're going to look right at everything right there too. I was talking to Aaron the other day just about possibilities like our courtyard or something like that for kids to get outside and try somewhere it's safe and contained and we can do it. And absolutely, we're looking at that'd be our easiest, best option.
Yep.
Just to get the kids outside, but we got plenty of room to spread them out and go from there. So
Okay.
hopefully it's a nice spring on there. Yeah.
Okay, I think that's it for the most part.
If there's any parents out there that just want to know what to do on transportation, principal's tip, put your kids on the bus. Because I'd rather have the buses move your kids into our school than have the parents drop off. We're people movers at that point, and we're trying to move in excess of 200 kids a day between cars coming and going in the same parking lot as well as buses coming and going. So I'd love to see more kids on the buses to help with that congestion and traffic flow.
On that same note, when you think about Jefferson Avenue, Martha Brown,
Yep.
the high school, and Brooks Hill, those are the 4 schools that only have one egress.
Well, JA too, I think, is probably tough, right?
JP's a little bit,
No, JA I meant.
yeah, JA, I said JA.
Yeah, okay.
JP, it's nice because you got the 2 lots.
Yep.
Minerva, you got the 2 egresses. Northside Dudley, you've got, so nice that we put those extra parking lots in.
Absolutely.
Because that makes all the difference in the world.
Absolutely.
But it's those 4 schools that have one egress on a main road
Yep.
that has our police departments busy.
And that's where the ridership will really help, as well as we have a staggered drop pickup, that people really stick to those times, and we know we can do it with that.
That was Mr. Charno, principal at Jefferson Avenue, advocating for ridership on the bus to help alleviate the traffic at Jefferson Avenue. And as many of you have seen, that traffic does get backed up. So thank you for that, Mr. Charno.
And I would just say that, similar to the K-5 committee, we actually did have parents saying, just tell us what to do, and we'll do it as long as we're comfortable with the distancing. But yes, if you tell them they want them on the bus, then that's what they want to hear.
So speaking of the police, I mean, do we have any partnership with the village or county police in terms of traffic management?
We have an excellent partnership with the Monroe County Sheriff and, of course, our Fairport Village Police. Our principals and, of course, Student Services Director Deb Miles has constant contact and communication on many levels, but when it comes to traffic and traffic safety, their presence is always there, and they can always be counted on to provide that level of support. Again, that's the county and the Fairport Village Police, excellent partners.
So Deb did touch upon, I think, a lot of the scheduling implications. The one piece that was brought up as just a consideration was for some of our special area teachers, for example, who may teach multiple grade levels within a class. And there was some suggestion at one point of possibly staggering either the times for dismissal in between classes and/or at the end of the day. So they just asked for some special consideration of how that might play out and affect them in their world. But as far as the curriculum piece is concerned, we talked about that whole idea of really the mind shift of when our students come back with the teachers, of finding that balance, of making them feel comfortable about being in school, and the stamina piece. And as we said before, many of them are so used to that idea of being able to complete assignments in their work and have their nights free, their weekends free, and they're in that rhythm. So, but interestingly, parents in our group said, but we still want to know at the end of the year how our students are faring. So what will you be doing? What kind of data or what kinds of things will you be doing to help our students and help our parents understand where they are in terms of their success in their achievements, as well as areas that they might need for growth in the future. So, I think our middle school groups are going to work together to, look at what is it that we can do. And we're not talking high stakes testing. We're talking about, what kinds of sort of, informative assessments can we give at a level that are not going to necessarily count towards a report card or, be punitive, but yet give some sort of a dipstick test to give the parents some indication, at least moving forward, of what has been achieved and what has yet to, be uncovered moving into next year. I don't know if Dave or Pat want to add anything onto that, but, other than that piece, again, it was, the implications there were of strong level of, we're not, if the New York State assessments are going to be given 3 through 8, that book 1, for example, in the science, for example, that's not going to be the only indicator that we would use to show parents. We would be using other assessments and other things as well to help with that.
Yeah, and Kristen Larson mentioned, we've got a lot of internal assessments that we use that would be probably better than some of the state tests. But we use the NWEA, the MAP assessments, and we typically do that in the spring anyway. So I imagine that that'll be one of our go-to assessments for parents, because it's nationally normed, and I'm sure they'll have considerations with regards to the pandemic this whole country has experienced. So more to look for on that, but that's kind of like what we're looking for.
So I think that's important, what you just said, and that's a nationally normed test, right?
Yep.
So it's not just Fairport, it's not just Monroe County, it's
Right.
not just New York, but it's national.
That's right.
Because this is a national pandemic, obviously, so.
Right.
That's true, but I can't take, this out of my, it shows the individual growth. And I think, we've been able to give it so you could see where you were, in last year at this time or the previous year, and you could see the range of growth. And I think that's, in my mind, is the most important, because, I get what you're saying, but at the end of the day, it's how is each child performing relative to where they are, and this is a great tool to do that.
So that's it. Any other questions?
The only other question I would have is that a lot of these kids, just like kindergarten kids, this is their first time in the building, right? Or, full-time, it's coming together as a group of kids. It's like the first day of school, so,
It'll be like our fourth first day of school this year.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm sure you guys have thoughts around that, and how it's like the first day of school, how you welcome these kids in and make them feel comfortable.
It was really funny, I think everybody at the start of the year, our first day of school was really strange because, the first day with masks, kids were really subdued. Sitting quietly in their seats the first day when teachers were walking in, it was odd. And I think kids, they've been great with the mask. I think their comfort level is a lot higher now. So we're anticipating when everyone's back together, there will be a bit more excitement with the kids seeing each other and all that. So the plan is to take it slow. The teachers have done a great job of honing that curriculum to where it needs to be. So we want to make sure, like we've said before, we're easing them in. We're covering what we need to make sure we're ready and they're successful to move on to that next grade level. And our brand new kids, like our sixth graders and stuff that are still newish because this year there's been, in one day out another right there too. They're feeling more comfortable going from there. So we're looking forward to that part about some of that noise and normalcy, hopefully right there too, while reinforcing one of the questions with our parents, especially in our advisory committee, was making sure those norms are there for the kids about the masks being on properly, how they're hugging the lockers, walking in the hallways, when to stop, like all those things that will kind of be reinforcing again with the kids. Even though we've been talking about it all year, it will seem like a brand new day and a brand new year again.
Are you guys all using lockers?
Sporadically. Like our kids for the first time, I think they had backpacks. We're letting our kids carry backpacks. So we're trying to have them stop at lockers, before school, maybe at lunch and after school. And it's funny because our kids, especially some of our smaller, younger kids, are carrying around, I think, it looks like twice their weight on their backpack.
We've also talked about the possibility to deconcentrate the halls, and have staggering periods.
Some different dismissal times that we're working on together about that. So our passing times may be longer, but that's make sure one group is switching, then another group can switch. So we're working on that too. To decongest the hallways to mitigate that.
We can all
And
get new
again, for those
backpacks.
parents out there that want to just get an idea what to do not let your kids carry around 50-pound backpacks. That's what we've got. We've got some kids that are just so afraid that they're not going to have everything. So the backpack evolved this year. We didn't anticipate that. because we started out the year with the lockers. Some kids were using them. Then they just got scared because they were not going to have everything with them. So now we do have little kids with incredibly heavy backpacks. So we're going to be, that's going to be our orientation in the fall, to kind of de-backpack the kids and go back.
And
And all the
similar,
backpacks are breaking, too.
similar to what parents were saying to our elementary friends about just tell us what you want to do, they were very eager and they fully recognized that things are going to look very differently over the number of weeks that the students are back. And they said, if we know exactly what that's going to look like or some things that we can do to prepare and have conversations at home, we'll be happy to have those conversations to even begin to reinforce some of that. So some of that will probably be through communications from the principals and on a regular basis as well, and some of their weekly communications of, here's what to look forward to, here are some changes, here are some things going on, so that maybe some guidance for the parents for some of those conversations at home.
Thank you so much, our middle school team. I'm going to ask Don Monticelli, ninth grade principal, and Bob Clark, Leanna Watt, and Doug Loft to come forward. Bob Clark and Doug Loft were both facilitating the 912 group, and we have Leanna and Dom who are also participating, active members and fully engaged.
I've been watching you all night, Damon. I'm ready. Just kidding.
Bob, he's met his quota for the night, so you're good.
That's good to know. So I probably won't take as much of your time, just because the themes as we went through this process and we shared out, of course we broke apart by grade bands, but then when we distilled all that information down, it was very similar. But some of the conversations that are nuanced to K-5, certainly don't apply at our level, and for very obvious reasons. So again, with response to, the overall plan, the proposed transition plan, and the asynchronous days, our teachers were very encouraged by that. There was certainly a healthy conversation about what those days would look like. I think they're on 6-8 up there. Oh, yeah, okay, thank you. So there was conversations about that, and understanding that, teachers, this actually started in many of our groups, our subgroups, from parents saying, I really think the teachers are going to need an opportunity to declutter classrooms, to reacquaint classes as they come together. So there was conversation about that. There was definitely an emphasis on the need for us to communicate our plans directly to students. And Jackson is here behind us, and that's something that he's actually shared directly with Brett and I when we had one of our student forums, is that our students are really in tune with what's going on, paying attention a lot to CDC guidance and what their teachers are communicating. And so they want to know, where are we in the plan? So there was a conversation about that. There was discussion about testing protocols in a timely way. Mr. Provenzano happened to come right into the meeting at that time and shared out that there's going to be tests available, so we're committed to moving forward with that protocol. There were also conversations about could we provide orientation for students that are moving from that virtual to in-person. Again, recurring theme that you've been discussing, what are we doing to account for that? I give you a quick update because I assume that you're curious. We started the school year around 171 virtual students. That number peaked at about 178. And Mrs. Waddle, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're down to 143. And as the other building principals have shared, it's been a give and take. During the surge, we saw people kind of in and out, but of late, it's been trending downward. A few students, it seems, a couple students a day. And based, going back to what David said, a comment about it's a lot of negotiating with families just to understand, for some students, this virtual environment just does not work. And so we're trying to wrap as much support as we can around them. So there's a lot of conversation around that and how we support those students. In terms of the orientation, we've had a great opportunities to do that with some of the asynchronous days where other students are not there. We're bringing them into the building, so we will be planful for that. Yes, sir.
So the second bullet
Not at
down,
all.
you're communicating directly to students about the return to allow for preparation. That's good. how do you feel like we're doing with the teachers? Do you feel like we're communicating with the teachers, and do they understand what the plan is?
Yeah, so I picked up on your question earlier, and of course,
Yep.
I want to be patient and wait our turn to jump in on that. So, our process is structured through the hierarchy, as you can imagine. So we had teachers participating in our groups, in our committee, in the 75, or actually it was 87 people. I apologize, in those groups, and so there was some high school staff involved in that. But then, and usually, our pattern would be to communicate with lead teachers and then go beyond that to faculty meeting. So that's in front of us still. We have our next lead teacher meeting, for example, April 6th. But to your point about where teachers are in hearing that information, I had a science lead teacher in my office today specifically asking about tables and desks because that information is filtering out from people that participated in the subgroups.
Just comment, in this world of very intelligent students, number one.
Sure.
But very socially connected, right?
Yep.
So they're talking, they're tweeting, everything else. There's a lot of information out there, right? So everybody's speculating, right? And so there's a lot of uneasiness, I think, within, and I'm not trying to speak for teachers. I'm just saying
Sure.
that they're hearing things, and if they hear things from the students that's very definitive before they've heard officially through the hierarchy, I'm just encouraging you guys to think about that hierarchy and think about the velocity that we get information out to the teachers, right?
So it's definitely imperfect, and, there's a lot of trying, and good faith efforts. Tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock, we'll be sharing similar information with our staff before we go with the public. We do have a representative advisory. The purpose of the representative advisory, as Mr. Clark said, is to get information out. And I think, I was receiving similar emails from some of your teachers about some of the things that they've been hearing, which is good. And I'm glad that the educators who are on there, the staff that is on there, they're doing that. But we are formally going to be doing a version of this tomorrow with our staff. I'm also going to be emphasizing what Bob Clark just said, is that they need to have these meetings as we return as well. Return from break, right? Because there's going to be more clarity. It's more personalized. They'll be able to do it in this room, at right distance, with all the right questions. But we're framing it out. The constituents are being reached out to via the committee. Is it perfect? It's never perfect. I'm glad we have wonderful student voices, and I know you're going to want to hear from Jackson in a little bit too. So I just want to emphasize the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think that, we learned a lot in August. We put out a fact document and said, hey, if you got a question, write it down. Within days, we had answered over 87 questions, and 87 questions spawned 50 more in the next iteration of that. So I think it's just the nature of our teachers that are very planful and are doing an amazing job of supporting each other and their students. And so they want to know as many of those answers as they can, and we'll certainly be transparent with them and try to answer as many as we can when we know the information. With regards to transportation, I know it might seem like it's an issue for us. One of the things we clarified for our group was that it's not typical for 3 students to ride the bus in the same seat in a high school. Ridership is different at the high school. It's very commonplace to see, more spaces on the bus. So we don't anticipate with the support that Peter's talked about being able to contract with 3 additional buses. We do an amazing job of dumping our building in 7 minutes every day after school. That's in a normal school year. And the worst of it is that parents and students have to be patient as we monitor that. We have all of the administrators in the high school outside with additional support and sentries. And it is a very smooth process. I think we do a lot of training. By speaking to parents. We have a lot of signage that we've added over the years. So I don't anticipate this being an issue. There will be an adjustment period. The biggest issue that we explained to our group is that our seniors are going to have to go through a re-permit process, if you will.
That was my question.
We had the luxury this year, because of the hybrid nature, that every student was given their own spot, essentially, even though they may have been sharing it and just not know it, because if they were in a Monday, Thursday cohort, somebody else would park there Tuesday, Friday. And now we have to go back to our normal process, which is to have driving partners. And so the communication home is going to be that we're going to encourage students to mitigate. But I can tell you, like in theory, we in the beginning of the year, we just assume that kids are driving themselves, and that's just not how it is. It's very commonplace for our kids to carpool at this point, and we're just going to continue to reemphasize how important it is for them to wear masks while they do that. and cross our fingers that they follow the rules.
So will they have to share a spot again? So,
Yes, they will. Yep. So
So what-
we're already planning that.
so what happens, because I know a lot of people carpool.
Sure.
So, yeah, so if there's a carpool on those cohort days with, let's say, 4 kids, and that means they won't be able, then parents will have to drive them the other day?
Not necessarily. I'm going to give them more credit and just tell you that they're very good at working this out. This is a very common high school problem, and so
I'm already in that problem.
Yeah, I realize that.
So-
I promise you have faith, and if not, we'll facilitate that. So it's going to
Okay.
come down to a handful of situations.
Yep.
And that's where Mrs. Edwards, as a new administrator, is excited to manage parking. It's like the most exciting thing for an administrator to take on. So it's not going to be an issue, I promise you.
I hope not.
And we'll work it out for you if we have to.
Okay.
Yeah.
What I worry about, as a parent who had a kid that drove herself to school at the Fairport High School, there's that one entrance, right? But they had usually all year to kind of get used to it and calm down. Now it's spring, the weather's getting warmer, the kids are coming together, there's going to be a tremendous amount of energy, and we're going to have cars and buses, and I just worry about that one intersection, just people being crazy because they're just excited to be there, and the weather's getting warm, and I just feel like anything we can do to
Damon?
tamp down.
40 years ago, we had that same problem without a signal light there.
Yeah, but cars only
But-
went 10 miles an hour.
But-
Well, the horses didn't go that fast.
But what I'm getting at is we had more students driving because we had more students in this building. We had no signal light out front, and it worked.
Well, let me just be really candid, because your fears are valid, and that's why we're out there. There's a strong commitment, not just, again, we could just send anybody outside and hope that it works. We don't. This is very managed with, again, all of the building administrators outside, myself included. I'm at my checkpoint every day. Brett beeps at me when he goes by, when I'm holding him up in traffic. It works, Damon. And, the part that is concerning most to us is inexperienced drivers, all right? But I'll be honest with you, it's usually a parent concern that we have, not the kids. So in terms of the training that you're kind of referring to, we do have driving seminars for our kids. They're mandated, and we'll refresh that in the spring. Mr. Monticelli retooled those a couple years ago for us. So we're completely prepared to do that. It's something that we would do normally at this time of year for the same reasons that you talked about. The weather's nicer. We remind them to, I just put out a message on Parent Square the other day talking about parents driving a little dangerously in a back parking lot because in the morning as we're bringing in over 1,000 people on a normal day right now, even in a hybrid situation, they come from all angles, and you have to drive slowly and you have to be aware of your surroundings. But we've changed the physical design. We've added walkways, we've added signage, we've added as many things as we can to make it safe, but it really comes down to some good judgment.
Add one more variable, though, Mr. Clark, and that
Yes,
is
sir.
that we're going to have construction crews starting to show up.
Yep, and we're very aware of that, but that's not going to start until June 30th, so we've got a little grace for now. So we'll take that problem next year, okay?
Damon, I'll forward you all the emails I get from
Yeah.
Parent Square talking about it.
I even put a nice little image in this last one, so. The other concern that we talked about was cafeteria, and again, we do have some nuance with our building that alleviate the stress and that, the other buildings don't, have access to. So, with our seniors going out to lunch, that is a benefit to us. So we can use the existing 3 cafeterias that we have to manage the current numbers. Right now, in the beginning of the year, in September, we expanded into the gym to make sure that we had more than 6 feet. So we have 12-foot tables, and we only have 3 kids sitting at them. And so we're confident that if needed, it will expand further into the gym. We've communicated with our partners in the PE department, and our athletic director, Mr. Killian's been outstanding. The timing of the year, the kids are headed outside for PE now anyways. Next year, we're not going to have a cafeteria. So it's really something that we're prepared for. And I think there was a question earlier about kids going outside. That was a conversation that came up from some of our students. Is there an opportunity to do that? We do have the small picnic area in the backside of our building. It is something that kids take advantage of, but I'll be honest with you, a lot of our kids are pretty content to hang out where they are with their friend groups, and we will consider expansion if need be, but we don't anticipate that we're going to need a lot. Okay? In terms of scheduling implications, we have our scheduling guru here. Mrs. Watt is our master scheduler. I'm just going to revisit one part of the conversation, and it was a question that Damon had earlier with regards to how we arrived at our virtual schedule. And I know that we talked about it in the fall, But the moment that we are approaching right now was one of the reasons we made that decision. You know, we made the decision to do our virtual setting synchronously so that we could pivot in or out. And so this coming back does not affect our class sizes at all. They exist as they are. The kids are co-seated, if you will, even though they're part of that group. And so that's helped us throughout this, especially from January to now, continue to take these kids back in. They're just going into their normal class. Where there are issues that we don't have as many as we've had in the past because we went through our period of declining enrollment and then sort of leveled out. And so our class sizes have come down in the last couple of years. Mrs. Watt's done a remarkable job of balancing classes. There are some anomalies. There are some teachers that might have a 28 or a 29. We have to figure out what the net is and to see if that class will fit in that size. We also have some anomalies with regards to our facilities. There are certain classrooms that are deeper or wider than other classrooms. For example, in the science wing, one of the newer classrooms, 523, is very deep and very wide. Classroom 226, which you've gone on visitations with me, is very tight. And so we are collaborating with lead teachers, and Mrs. Watt has run a section load report. And we're going to proactively identify if there are other places to take those classes so that we have the size or the space that we need to do this.
Okay.
Can I just add one thing?
Yep.
Just for the sake of numbers, because we've been talking a lot about the virtual students and what that looks like to have your full class back together again, right, plus these virtual students. In any given classroom, there's anywhere from 0 virtual students, right? Big building, lots of classes all going on at once. Anywhere from 0 virtual students to at most 6. Right, but by and large, it's maybe 2 to 3 students in the virtual setting who are coming back. That said, it's still complicated, right, to have your whole class back again, 2 very distinctly different groups you've been working with, right? Bringing them back together, plus having the virtual students. So it speaks to, again, having that time for teachers to really plan and prepare for what that next first day looks like all over again.
And I may have missed this point, but it's kind of complementary to this. Many of our teachers have taught synchronously all year.
Yeah.
And so, for example, almost our entire math department has been teaching synchronously every day throughout the year. This will not represent any change to them. They're not going to have to change anything regarding the pace of instruction, and they're used to having not just a couple students virtually, but maybe 12 students virtually and 12 in front of them. Right. Also, a lot of our AP teachers made that conscious decision at some point during the year because the College Board is having their assessments, and they went back to the traditional formats. So understanding what the kids needed to be prepared for, they consciously made decisions to move to that synchronous model and have been managing it extremely well throughout the year. But there is going to be a period of adjustment. I think more to your question, there is a continuum of people in terms of their depth or their familiarity in working in those spots. And we've tried to address the teachers that were forced into this. They're getting a different level of support as much as we can with our tech coaches, with our administrators, and many of their peers that are extremely comfortable and have been using Google Classroom for a long time.
So I would just comment that, in the environment that we've been in with hybrid, right, where I've got 8 kids in a class and 6 kids remote or similar, that's been what we've done as a temporary way to get by, right?
Certainly.
Now with 20 kids going back in the classroom and 3 being remote, it's going to be different. Those 3 kids that are remote are not going to get the attention that they did before. And the preparation for the staff is, I'm just encouraging you to stay close to the pulse of your staff. Because
Absolutely.
You may think they've done it, it's not a big deal. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. I'm saying there will be, it's a big deal.
Let me go back and just say, I say that they're adept users. I certainly don't think it's not a big deal. I think some of our teachers are at their breaking points. There's no doubt about that. And they keep showing up every day and putting in that effort. Like you, Damon, I'm married to a teacher, and I see her work till 10 o'clock at night preparing for lessons. She actually teaches 2 classrooms at the same time. So I have a very good barometer at home. My kids participate that as well. I have 3 teenagers. So that usually informs my decisions, and then when I come to school, it's affirmed by the conversations that I have with the teachers. So we're certainly understanding that and where they're at in terms of their mental health and how they're getting through the year and doing everything that we can to support it. We don't think this is going to be easy, but I think there was a value judgment that we all made back in August that in Fairport and what a Fairport education means, we didn't want to take away opportunities from kids. And in order to create a separate virtual school would have cost us around $2 million to do that and hire 25 teachers that didn't exist. And so I think that everybody understood this was the lesser of two evils. And it has not come without growing pains, as they talked about earlier, and some strain by our teachers. But I do think they've been up for the challenge, and I commend that, and we just need to support that.
And I understand what we did this year, moving into this year. It was a pandemic.
Sure.
And everybody kind of did what they had to do. What I'm saying now is we consider a reentry plan going forward. Hold on, bear with me. As we just over-communicate, right? And so just make sure that, I don't know, just my recommendation is just over-communicate as much as possible. And if you're not communicating, tell them what the plan is to communicate.
Absolutely
So
good feedback.
we've talked at length, even as the Board of Education, developing expectations about moving forward. We do know that this has changed education. We do know that there may be different cost centers moving forward. And that's a total team effort of us defining the expectations, because there will be a BOCES option that will be more robust, different options for students that maybe some of our teachers will even be teaching as well. So that's in the works to be developed. But again, that, takes a collaboration with our FEA partners as well. And I know that they're up for that conversation. And I agree, like, it hasn't been easy. It's been admirable.
Yeah.
I've had many of my colleagues, knock on the door and say, hey, how'd you guys do that? And then they shifted gears in midstream. So we set the standard. We need to continue to grow. And as a unit here, we need to continue to say, this is what we believe relative to online learning at each one of these grade bands.
Yeah, and again, that anxiety absolutely came up in the groups, and we discussed that being a parking lot item. We need to work on that. We don't know what that's going to look like.
And Damon, just to reassure, as far as the scheduling process goes, we, in order to meet deadlines for budget, right, and being able to come with the asks for staffing and things like that, we're right on track where we normally would be with students making requests. Their schedules haven't been built yet. They're just making the requests that they have. And that impacts, right, and informs our staffing decisions and things like that. But we're not so far down that road yet that there isn't more time to make decisions around that.
Again, I think that the thing that's most relevant in that conversation is, when we made those decisions in August, there was no vaccine. We weren't testing. We didn't have any understanding of what it meant for mitigation in our buildings. And we have all of those answers coming into this summer. So I don't expect to be in a war room with Brett for over a week with him throwing grenades in every 5 seconds. And what about K5? And what about K6? And we're kind of sick in that we like the problem solving and we enjoy that a little bit, but it's different. We have more answers, and I think that's where we, as administrators, have a lot more confidence. And it's really, I would say, due to the staff and the students' efforts. We said this in our meeting the other night. Our students have been remarkable with regards to mitigation. And there was so much, going back to the questions in where that anxiety that you're talking about were teachers and what's it going to be like when there's five days of instruction. All of that anxiety that happened in the fall was, are they going to wear their masks? What's going to happen with that? The kids are amazing with that stuff. And many of the staff members, if you talk, will say that, I thought it was going to be an issue, but it's not. And it's just because they've been so compliant and so willing to engage with that stuff.
Speaking of our kids, Jackson, would you mind just kind of giving us a little bit of an idea of where you are? And we know you're a senior. We know this is the home stretch for you. On the committee, you were on the committee, and were there other students there?
Yes, so we had two
Different-
other students
different
in
grades?
my grade band, yes. No, they were all seniors,
Okay.
but they provided a unique perspective given we've gone through all 3 years almost now at Fairport High School. So we had a unique knowledge of going in with the perspective of, okay, if I'm a sophomore coming into Fairport High School, coming off of virtual learning, what am I looking for? What do I need to know going in? Yep, so I think just from the perspective of a senior and somebody who is really interested in learning as much as I can about this process, like so many of the other kids at Fairport High School, I think communication is key. I know some of our instructional directors have mentioned that, and I think that, using Parent Square, social media, the announcements, that is really key because kids are, especially at, the 9 through 12 level, are really interested in knowing, okay, what's the plan? What's happening next? And I think, honestly, also another part of that is kids are also concerned about their safety in some sense too. They want to make sure that, they were still following the mitigation protocols that the district has put in place and the schools put in place. And I think our building leadership has done a fantastic job making sure that those mitigation efforts are still followed. I know we still are using the one-way halls, masking, of course, and hand sanitizing. And I think reinforcement, once our kids come back into the building, is going to be a key part of that. Because we, with double the kids in the building, that's going to be double the germs. So we want to make sure, spraying down of desks and hand sanitizing coming in and out of every room, that is really followed. Yep.
What would you say is the pulse or the tenor of the high school kids once they found that we're coming back full-time?
I would say it was a mix at first. I think kids are more excited now just to be able to see their friends on the opposite cohort day. I haven't seen some kids that, I was kind of just acquaintances with since like last year. So just an example of that, it's hard for some kids to be able to make those social connections. I know some kids have been doing really well with the hybrid environment, and then some kids really need that additional social connection that would come with the 5 days a week.
So Jackson, the numbers that I saw, the numbers that you talked about, about 145 kids are staying virtual. That's going from a 2-day-a-week virtual with 3 days a week of sleeping in and kind of, a couple hours a day of school to now 5 days a week tapping in virtually. So have you talked to anybody, any students that are going to be virtual, and are they aware of that challenge? Are they up for it?
So some of the virtual friends I've talked to, I think they are concerned about being on a screen for so long, and I think there definitely are some discussions going on at, secondary cabinet and other locations about this, just because, it's a problem with all of the levels too. It's not just high school. I don't have a lot of other answers on that, but I can tell you that kids are going to want to, have some time built into the day across all grade levels to really make sure that they're able to, get outside for a little while and have some break.
We had a student in our group, actually, who spoke to a little bit of that. She had been in the virtual model the bulk of the school year. And after roughly a semester of doing that at home on the computer, was like, it's done. I can't do it anymore like this. And I need to come back, right? Which she did. So it's really super individualized. It's really based on family situation, this student's own mental health and where they are. A student in their senior year might feel a lot differently about returning than a student who's a sophomore, right? It's just very, very different for every single family.
I think another part too is, Fairport has done a great job offering and letting kids come back, from the virtual model. I know from having two parents who are also in education that some of their districts have not been as lenient about that. And I think that's been really good for a lot of kids' mental health.
If I could add to that.
Thanks,
really-
Jackson.
If I could add to that, a huge thank you to Jackson. Dominic Monticelli, principal of Minerva DeLand, for folks at home. We've been in a lot of meetings the last few weeks, and Jackson's been at every one of them, so thank you very much, Jackson. Very impressive. On that note, on student feedback and student communication, I think that's a vital piece, as we're saying. We're communicating a lot as grown adults. Our young adults have a lot to say, and the more we can communicate directly with them, the better. And I echo your statements. I had captured some soft data from the 9th graders. Last week, we had a brotherhood, sisterhood, community building activity, our student leadership team. Basically, it was commonalities activities. So everybody stood up. It was one class at a time, one global class at a time, stood up, answered various questions, and said, move to this side of the room for agree or disagree. One of the questions was, I'm excited for a 5-day return to school. And I was fascinated because the parent feedback, the hard data, is about 80%, 85%, right? Students were about 55% in favor, 60% in favor. So we stopped and asked, we talked, and it's just like we're saying, it varies very much. A majority want to see their friends, and they know that, man, I really don't want to be in school 5 days a week, but it's the best thing for me. And some just want to sleep in, they're honest, which is fantastic. And some, it's working. They figured it out, and they understand the rhythm, and it's working for them. So that was interesting, soft data, and I know we have to take into a lot more than maybe that they're exposed to. So I just advocate, again, as we're saying, to expose our students to all the information with that communication.
I think that's a great point, and Mr. Clark and I have been talking about and at the meeting last night with Jackson, we need to do some student forums. We can do them virtually. I have been in the building. We've, met with different groups at different times over the past month. But I do think that that is incredibly important just to, as we come back to spring break, gear up by communicating with our students, in addition to those personal conversations that need to happen in each building with our staff as to the point of communication. So this is really big right now, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And there's more questions probably than answers. We're going to continue to hone it down and communicate as we move forward.
So I don't know if we didn't really touch on this last piece. Do you want me to get to that, or you guys have been at this for a while? Yeah, I'll do this quickly.
I'm kind
So-
of curious.
Yeah, so with regards to the curriculum component, the message is really no different than what was talked about prior. I think our teachers, the message from the beginning of the year has been to teach about 75 to 80% of the curriculum. And our teachers have used a lot of the time that they've been given to collaborate to adjust and modify the scope and sequence. So the message coming back, I think that the concern that was expressed was, well, if we come back and we're in class 5 days a week, then does that mean like twice as much homework? And the answer would be no. And the reason is very simple and maybe a little antithetical to what the kids are thinking, just in terms of simple math. But what's happened in a virtual environment, we learned this last spring and listening to our kids and asking for feedback last spring when there was a hard shutdown, was that when teachers not knowing the end in mind in terms of assessments until very late in the spring, there was a lot of pressure for them to continue teaching and for the students to do that independently. And that's where that feeling of, extra work that's coming at the kids, because there's that pressure that teachers are feeling to prepare them. So we know more information finally about that situation, but it's still incomplete. We know the state's made recommendations for us to only offer 4 of those assessments. And so we have to determine what that means, but there's still this waiver that's hanging out there. So I don't want to get into too much of the nuance of that until we really know, but we're going to start by having conversations with our teachers about assessment and asking. I sent out a conversation piece to my lead teachers as a prompt, where are we with developing local assessments? You heard from the 6-8 group that parents still want to know, like, where are our kids at? And what does that mean? Are things going to count on transcripts? Those are questions that are real questions from parents and teachers and students. What does it look like? Fortunately, along the way, as a board, as an administration, we've already made some of the decisions that impact that. For example, a couple of years ago, we stopped including the ELA assessment and the Common Core math assessments because the state recommendation was that it was about the standards and not about the score, because the scoring rubric doesn't really align. And so going on that feedback and gathering consensus around the county, we stopped doing that. Now, our science teachers at the time felt very passionately that it was important to include it. You can imagine this year, they feel very importantly that it's not important to do that because they don't want a gotcha moment for kids, and that they've made these instructional decisions, sound decisions, to reduce the amount of curriculum that they're teaching. So to answer the broad question, it's not going to be a ramp up. It's going to be a go deeper. We're going to make sure, as Mr. Provenzano said, the direction from the top down is going to be to love our kids, to get it to now they need to introduce the cohorts together. Some have had a sense of community. Those that have been synchronous, probably more so than others, but they're going to develop that sense of community. It's the thing that we take pride in. It's the thing that we talked about in Brotherhood Sisterhood, the thing that is kind of the root of our district. So they're going to be given license to do that through our communication, again, from the superintendent, from building principals, from lead teachers. And the time that we give them to work on asynchronous work, we're going to encourage them to talk as a department and in their subgroups within the department by, for example, by in the sciences, et cetera, in the maths, the different levels, to talk about that curriculum and how they're going to move forward. Again, certain areas can back off. Now, having said that, it's a mixed bag at the high school. Our AP teachers are going to still move forward because they have assessments in May in through early June. But some of them have a little bit of a luxury in that they've extended the window for testing. That's unique. We've never had that before. So that's going to inform their instructional decisions. Teachers that are still teaching algebra, the living environment, they have to teach with the understanding that there's an assessment still there. And they're going to do their best to do that. But they're doing that at about 75 to 80% of the curriculum because we think that's the best move to meet our kids where they're at. And they've been doing a great job with it. And there has been some level of understanding from the state in terms of waiving, for example, lab requirements, which have been probably the most challenging aspect of teaching science during a pandemic.
Okay.
I know you got questions, I can see it.
Yeah, I have questions.
Go ahead.
Because people keep asking me. So
Sure.
if a student failed a Regents, would that mean they failed the class?
Mrs. Watt is the expert here.
Yeah, I mean, and will it be consistent, I guess, is my other
No,
question.
and that's always been the case, that's not true. So they stand alone, completely separate from one another, right?
Right.
So a student could pass the course and not pass the exam and retake it potentially, right?
Right.
At the other assessment points throughout the school
Not
year.
in August.
Correct, absolutely.
So-
But there are other times that a student can take it. And again,
Right.
if they decide that they are going to exempt students, right, passing the course exempts them from the exam.
There's
right?
also some serious nuance when we talk about, there are 14 paths to graduation.
Absolutely.
Oh,
There
I know,
are
yeah.
low pass options,
Right.
so it really is student dependent.
Yeah.
And again, we will guide our families and students through that process.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that what we understand is that they're not going to be held harm for that.
The goal is to really earn the course credit,
Right.
right? That's most impactful, right? That can impact their trajectory towards graduation on time, right? Where the exams, if there was a need to retake, they have multiple
Right.
opportunities to do so without backing them up too much.
Potentially a lot of kids, right, that could be impacted by that.
Think-
I'm just thinking that it's been a tough year, right?
Yeah.
So they haven't been in class 5 days a week. Expecting them to pass a normal Regents exam. I
They,
think
they
a
do
lot-
not have to pass them this year.
Yeah.
Well, they don't.
It doesn't count towards
And the
graduation
August
requirement.
exams have been canceled.
Right.
Yes,
Already,
thank you.
all of
That's
them.
what I kind of wanted you to
So,
say.
yeah.
So it's
the
not just
August
coming
exams
from
have been
me?
canceled for sure. Yeah, that's a definite. But even with these exams, again, some students want to have it on their transcript, right? And will go and want to retake and earn that
Yep.
specific type of grade. So it is an opportunity, but it doesn't impact them towards ultimate graduation requirements right now.
Right,
A waiver on the labs as well?
There's a-
yeah.
The lab,
already been
the lab
waived.
requirement was removed in January.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I assume they still have to do some of the labs, but there's,
I mean, the science is very practical by nature, and so, I think that a lot of teachers have been doing labs differently throughout
Mm-hmm.
the year, but the paper requirement labs, the minute requirement.
Yeah, the
Kristen,
minutes
right,
that are required have
is,
been waived.
is what's been waived, yeah. And usually you had to have a certain number of minutes to sit for the exam.
Correct.
Right. So again, with regards to instruction, again, I think that there was a lot of conversation about how does this, the other component that came out of our conversation was like, what does this mean for the arts? What does this mean for our music classes? What does the guidance say about that? And so we took the opportunity to reassure at least the people within our 912 group that our music teachers, our director and Pam Cerani have been advocating and trying to understand the direction from NYSSMA, CDC, et cetera. We're planning concerts outside. Bill Tiberio and the like have been communicating with our partners in the town of Perrington. We're going to be holding a musical outside. And that's going to be extremely new for us. So I think just one general comment in terms of the excitement about kids. Some of the information that we've been able to communicate in the last 3 weeks has changed the tenor of where our kids are at. I would have to tell you that if you had asked this question a little over a month or 6 weeks ago, kids were done with high school. A lot of seniors were like, I'm just kind of over this. I want to go to college now because they've been living this for so long. They missed out on a junior prom. They were missing out on a lot of rites of passage. Being able to develop a plan to possibly be outside, to develop a graduation, possibly, the 100 days of graduation is tomorrow morning. To start experiencing some of those rites of passage, to have a concert, to now plan for a musical, that's a lot more of what high school is all about. I know we all take it personally as a social studies teacher. I know my class was the most important thing that kids took, but high school is so much more a collection of memories and experiences. And again, I think the general excitement that I hear and talk about with kids is coming on, again, bro-sis, 100 days of graduation, right around the corner we've got decision day. It just starts to become a very exciting time, and they are looking forward to it on top of vaccinations and progress. So it's a very hopeful time.
how has running 2 seasons of sports in 1 season gone?
I guess, I don't know if you're probably not aware of this, but Brett and I sit on a Monroe County board with the athletic director, so I have a little bit of a different window into that and spent a long time coaching. I'm extremely pleased that it's back. I wasn't happy about the dichotomy between what happened there versus the arts, and that caused a lot of advocacy, rightfully so. But it gives us leverage in a way that helps with engagement. And it's very helpful. There are certain kids that have turned it around because they went right from basketball, and now they're headed into football, and then they're headed into something after that. And again, as I was saying, high school is so much more about just one class than it is the total experience. And our kids didn't have a lot to come to school for and spend a lot of time on a computer. And now they're outside and they're practicing, and we've been able to do this, not without issue, you know, we've been working through our stuff, but we've got that part down. We've got this contact tracing down. We've been able to mitigate, and they've had successful, you know, we've had successful seasons all over the county. And so I'm going to take that because it's our kids are wearing their jerseys to school, and they have smiles on their face, and they're talking about those experiences, and that's what high school is about. And that is the energy that's been missing from our building in a large way.
I'm watching the clock, and I want to wrap things up by 9 o'clock because we've been here too long.
So I think that speaks to the depth of what we're undertaking here. And we can continue to talk about this through into the evening. And I do appreciate the investment of the team that presented here tonight with our facilitators and our building level leaders, because they are truly the experts. And of course, our staff is highly invested and engaged and interested to learn more. And I'm interested to hear some board comments, and this is an ongoing conversation. It's not going to be over tonight, that's for sure. We'll be doing the same thing tomorrow night with community, so.
I would just say, I think this is amazing, absolutely amazing, and I commend each and every one of you for just the thorough, practical, and child-centered decisions that you've presented to us tonight. From transportation, that can-do attitude and positivity, to just all the details that you included in K through 12. I think it's absolutely beautiful work, and I truly appreciate it.
Yes, I'd like to echo that as well. I mean, extraordinary planning, but much more so in terms of the emphasis on the students and your enthusiasm itself in terms of, you know, yes, it's very difficult. None of us have been in a pandemic, and we certainly pray that this one is about to end, certainly by the time we are ready to go back in September. But the energy and that planning and the concern that you have for these students and for each other, I mean, just kudos and cupcakes, okay?
Anybody else? Anybody else comments? No, Damon, hold on.
I agree too. I'm not going to talk more because I feel like I asked lots of questions, but of course, with 3 kids in 3 different buildings with very different situations in terms of hybrid, virtual, I'm very appreciative on many facets in many different situations on the effort, the involvement of parents, the involvement with teachers on these committees. It's pretty amazing. So I don't think I've seen that in many other communities. So great job.
And I appreciate the emphasis being where it is on the mental health, on the activities, on allowing time to get situated and back into the swing of it, as opposed to, well, the tests are coming up, or there's going to be more homework, or any of that. I feel as though the work's extraordinary, and I really love where the emphasis seems to be.
And to all surpass my expectations, at least where a week and a half ago, where the committees were just starting up in terms of what was presented tonight. It's incredible. I believe we had a public comment once that talked about how quickly we shut down, but how hard it seems to be, and they thought that it shouldn't be that way, right? We could reopen on a dime, but everything presented here tonight says why. It's like, you know, you build a sandcastle. It takes you a half hour to build a sandcastle, and then 5 seconds you walk right through it and destroy it, right? We can shut things down. We can always deconstruct, demolish quicker than we can build back up, and I appreciate all that work. Relative to the focus of mental health, I will say in our home, caught off guard. 2 parents, my wife and I, right? We responded. We want our kids back in school. We're looking forward to that. We want it done in the right way. One of my children catches winds, and it's been 7 days of waterworks. right? Not another change this school year. It's working for me, right? I got the habit down, so I appreciate that that's the focus. We haven't backed down necessarily, but we're wrapping our arms around, our children to support them. But I was surprised. We were caught off guard. We didn't realize that was going to be as big a stressor as it was. And, Mr. Monticelli, I appreciate that you did that in the schools, wherever you ended up. Over there, that's right, sorry. That you saw the students much different than the parents. And so, I wouldn't have thought that. Didn't even think to ask my children when we filled out that survey, and perhaps I should have, but we would have made the same decision anyway. But thank you all for the incredible knowledge.
So I would just echo everybody's views, really, and I just come away thinking, like, what a bunch of pros, right? You guys are all fantastic, really, and really well thought out. I really appreciate the structure you put in place with the advisory committees, and the fact that we had parents involved, and they're not here, but I really want to thank everybody, all the parents that participated, having that input, having student input, having PTA input, and tech coaches and everybody else, really getting a really good cross-section of stakeholders and getting their fears and anxieties and as well as hopes and aspirations is really good. But you guys all did an excellent job. I think I was blown away. Started with Aaron and the airflow, and it just kept on going. So anyway, good stuff.
It's been a year since we asked our administration, Brett, all the administrators here, all the administrators who are not here, who do work in our buildings, our parents, our community members. We asked them on a dime a year ago to change course. And within a matter of days, everybody in this room and those who are not in this room, all 45,000 people who live here and work here in this community made a change, and we all came together on that. Then came July and August, we asked you to make another change. And what did you do? You all rose to the occasion. All 45,000 people rose to the occasion. We rose, we made the change. Now we've asked you to make another change. And yes, we're tired, we're exhausted. But you know what? There's not one administrator in this district who said, no, I'm not going to do that. They said, okay, yeah, let's go for it. You rose to the occasion. You're still rising to the occasion. Brett, thank you for your leadership. Thank you to everybody here, because all of us, and I know there are a lot of people in the community who don't believe this, we are doing what's best for our kids. Our kids are first. Every one of us. I've worked with many of you. I've worked in the schools. Marty's worked in the schools. Arlette's worked in education. We know first thing we do when you open that door in that school, whether it's the first day of school, whether it's the first day back, whether it's the first day going back full time, the first thing you do is you smile at those kids and say, come on, let's go. We got work to do. And we do it. And we do it because we love these kids. And thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for all that we're putting into this. And you're going to continue to put in, because this is just the beginning of take 3. And we know that take 4 is going to come in September. But we know we'll do it, because everybody here who's behind me, and I apologize for my back being to you, and those of you who are watching, thank you. This is amazing. It's an amazing place to live. It's an amazing place to work. And I'm just very fortunate that we have all of these incredible people here who are putting our kids first. Thank you for watching this evening, and this will be recorded. This is so you can look at this at a later time. Brett, you wanted to say a few minor things about tomorrow?
Tomorrow evening, we'll have a virtual town hall meeting via our YouTube live channel. There is a Google doc out there where you can, actually a Google form where you can submit questions, and we'll do our best to answer them as we move through our presentation. We will also be communicating with our staff who will be interested to, again, hear details shared. But again, for the staff, a lot of these details will be answered in the building as we continue to move along too. So we're going to do our best to always communicate. And I just want to echo my appreciation to our administrators who've led the charges, who've put a lot of the structure and organization into these groups. I lean on you, and I'm grateful for all of you and for those who are participating. To our Board of Education, you're highly invested. I don't know of a board that is harder, such a hard workers, so invested and engaged, so we can give our students the very best experiences. That's your number one priority. So I'm honored and privileged to be working and serving with all of you. Thank you all.
And I do also have to, it slipped my mind, and I don't know why it slipped my mind, but all the teachers who work in our buildings, all of our support staff, our cafeteria, our transportation, our custodians, our secretaries, our nurses, our paraprofessionals, everybody who works in our buildings have gone above and beyond. I often thought to myself, I don't know if I could have done what our teachers have done. I've been retired a couple of years now. I don't know if I could have done it. It is monumental what we have asked these people to do, and we can only say thank you. Good night, all.